The ballroom fell silent when Clarissa Whitmore did the unthinkable. For 6 years she'd been invisible, the poor relation managing a nobleman's estate, unseen and unheard. Then the Duke's charming brother noticed her, and suddenly the Duke himself awakened to what he'd ignored. Two brothers, one woman, an entire aristocracy watching. But when Adrian Hale, the cold Duke of Ashwell, tried to claim her through power and privilege, Clarissa did what no woman of her position had ever dared. She walked away from everything. This is the story of how an invisible woman became unstoppable. Stay until the end to see how she rewrites her destiny. Drop a like and tell us what city you're watching from in the comments below. The rain came down in sheets the day Clarissa Whitmore arrived at Ashwell Park, and it hadn't really stopped since. Not the rain itself, that had cleared years ago, but the weight of it, the cold seep of insignificance, the constant reminder that she existed only in the margins of other people's lives. That never lifted. She stood now in the estate's main parlor, hands folded at her waist, watching the senior housekeeper, Mrs. Dalton, inspect the silver service with narrowed eyes. The older woman's mouth puckered like she'd bitten into a lemon. "This teapot has a spot." Clarissa stepped forward, examined the gleaming surface. There was no spot. There never was, but she'd learned that truth mattered less than compliance. "I'll have it repolished immediately, Mrs. Dalton." "See that you do." The housekeeper sniffed. "His Grace returns tomorrow. Everything must be perfect. Not that he notices, mind you, but standards are standards." Clarissa nodded, her face a carefully composed mask of dutiful attention. Inside, a familiar numbness settled over her thoughts like frost over a window. 6 years. 6 years of this. Mrs. Dalton swept from the room, her keys jangling at her waist like a jailer's chain. The moment she disappeared, Clarissa allowed herself one long breath. Then she picked up the already perfect teapot and carried it back to the kitchen herself. The servants' corridor was dim and narrow, the walls pressing in from both sides. She navigated it automatically, her feet knowing every worn stone, every slight dip in the floor. This was her world now, the hidden passages, the back staircases, the spaces between the grand rooms where the real work happened. In the kitchen, she found young Annie scrubbing pots, her thin arms working furiously. "Annie, when you're done there, could you take this teapot to the silver pantry? Mrs. Dalton wants it repolished." The girl looked up, confused. "But miss, I just polished all the silver this morning. You checked it yourself." "I know." Clarissa set the teapot down gently. "Polish it again anyway." Annie's face fell, but she nodded. She was learning the same lessons Clarissa had learned. That logic had no place here, that questions led nowhere, that survival meant keeping your head down and your mouth shut. Clarissa moved through the rest of her duties with mechanical efficiency. She reviewed the menu for tomorrow's dinner. She checked the linens in the guest chambers. She inventoried the wine cellar and noted that 3 bottles of the 1798 Bordeaux had been drunk, no doubt by the estate manager, Mr. Pemberton, who thought his theft was invisible because she was. She made a note in her private ledger. Not to report it. What would be the point? She had no authority here. She was neither servant nor family, neither employee nor guest. She was a ghost who happened to do a great deal of useful work. The Whitmores had once been a respected family. Minor nobility, but respectable. Her father had been a baronet with an estate in Derbyshire, a man of learning and moderate fortune. Clarissa had grown up in that world, educated, cultured, expecting a future of comfort, if not grandeur. Then the investments failed. Then the debts came. Then her father died, and the estate passed to a distant cousin who wanted nothing to do with a 20-year-old girl with no dowry and expensive tastes in books. Her mother's sister, Lady Margaret, had offered a solution. "Come to Ashwell Park," she'd written. "My husband's nephew is the Duke there. They need someone to manage the household while he's away in London. Just for a little while, dear, until you find your feet." That had been 6 years ago. Lady Margaret had died within the first year, a sudden fever that took her in 3 days. Her husband had followed 6 months later, and Clarissa had been left in a strange limbo, too well-bred to be dismissed like a servant, too poor to leave, too useful to be noticed as a person rather than a function. She managed Ashwell Park because someone had to, and because she was good at it. The Duke, Adrian Hale, spent most of his time in London attending to his parliamentary duties and his business interests. He visited the estate perhaps 4 times a year, stayed a fortnight at most, and in all that time he'd spoken directly to Clarissa maybe a dozen times. "Miss Whitmore, see that the blue drawing room is prepared." "Miss Whitmore, I'll have guests for dinner Tuesday." "Miss Whitmore, there's a draft in the library." Never, "How are you?" or "Thank you," or "I see you've kept this place running flawlessly in my absence." Just orders, delivered in that flat, distant tone he used for people he considered beneath his notice. She told herself she didn't care. She told herself that invisibility was a kind of freedom, that as long as no one looked at her too closely, she could exist in peace. She told herself a lot of things that might have been true if she said them enough times. By evening, the house was ready. Every surface gleamed, every fire was laid, every bed was made with hospital corners tight enough to bounce a coin. Clarissa stood in the main hall looking up at the grand staircase that swept toward the family wing and felt the familiar hollowness in her chest. This house was beautiful. It was also a cage. "You're working late again, miss." She turned to find Thomas, the head footman, watching her with concern. He was one of the few servants who treated her with anything resembling kindness, probably because he'd been hired after she'd already established herself, and didn't know he was supposed to look through her like glass. "His Grace arrives tomorrow," she said. "I want everything perfect." "It already is. It always is." Thomas hesitated. "Begging your pardon, miss, but you should rest. You'll wear yourself to nothing at this rate." Clarissa managed a smile. "I'm fine, Thomas. Thank you." He didn't look convinced, but he bowed slightly and withdrew. She waited until his footsteps faded, then climbed the back stairs to her own room, a small chamber in the family wing, far too grand for a servant, but too isolated for a guest. Another nowhere space? She lit a single candle and sat at the narrow desk beneath the window. From a locked drawer, she withdrew her private journal and opened it to a fresh page. "Tomorrow he returns," she wrote, "and I will disappear again into the walls and the work, into the invisible machinery that keeps his life smooth and his world ordered. He will notice nothing. He never does. Sometimes I wonder what would happen if I simply left. If I walked out the door one morning and never came back. How long would it take for anyone to realize? A day? A week? Would the house fall apart without me? Or would they simply find another invisible woman to take my place? I tell myself I stay because I have nowhere else to go. But the truth is darker than that. I stay because at least here I am useful. At least here my mind has something to work on, even if no one knows I have a mind at all. I have become very good at being nothing." She closed the journal and locked it away again. Then she blew out the candle and lay down in the dark, listening to the house settle around her like an old beast finding its position for sleep. Tomorrow, Adrian Hale would return. Tomorrow, the performance would begin again. The careful balance of competence and invisibility, the dance of being essential without ever being seen. Clarissa had no reason to think this time would be any different. She had no idea how wrong she was. The Duke arrived at 3 in the afternoon, his carriage rolling up the curved drive with the punctuality of a man who expected the world to arrange itself around his schedule. Clarissa watched from the window of the upper gallery, hidden behind the heavy drapes. Adrian Hale stepped down from the carriage with the same controlled grace he brought to everything. Tall, dark-haired, with features that might have been handsome if they weren't so rigidly composed. He was 34 years old and looked like a man who'd never smiled in his life. Pemberton rushed forward to greet him, bowing with excessive servility. The Duke barely acknowledged him, already moving toward the house with long strides. Behind him came his valet, Carson, and enough luggage for a month's stay. Clarissa's stomach tightened. A month. She'd hoped for a week. She descended to the main floor via the servants' stairs and positioned herself in the front hall at the precise moment the Duke entered. Not too eager, too articulate, not too hidden, just there, ready to be useful if needed, invisible if not. "Your Grace," she curtsied. "Welcome home. I trust your journey was pleasant?" His eyes passed over her like she was part of the wallpaper. "The blue drawing room? Prepared as requested, Your Grace. A light tea is set for 4 o'clock and dinner will be at 8. Cook has prepared the menu you prefer." "Fine." He handed his hat and gloves to Thomas without looking at the footman either. "I have correspondence to attend to. See that I'm not disturbed." Of course, Your Grace. He was already walking away, his boots echoing on the marble floor. Clarissa stood perfectly still until he disappeared into his study, then exhaled slowly. Welcome home, indeed. The next 3 days followed the familiar pattern. The Duke kept to his study during the day, emerging only for meals, which he took in solitary silence. He rode out each morning at dawn and returned by 9. He spoke to Clarissa only to issue instructions, never meeting her eyes. She might as well have been a particularly efficient piece of furniture. On the 4th morning, everything changed. Clarissa was in the library, supervising the dusting of the books, a task Mrs. Dalton always botched, when Thomas appeared in the doorway, looking flustered. "Begging your pardon, miss, but there's been a message from London. The Duke's brother is arriving this afternoon." Clarissa straightened. "His brother?" "Mr. Christopher Hale, miss. I'm told he'll be staying at least a fortnight." Her mind immediately began calculating. Christopher Hale rarely visited Ashwell Park. The younger brother, the charming one, the one who'd chosen the military over politics and had spent the last several years on the continent. She'd met him exactly once, at Lady Margaret's funeral, where he'd spoken to her for approximately 3 minutes before being pulled away by other mourners. "Prepare the green sweet," she said quickly, "and tell cook we'll need to expand the menu. Mr. Christopher prefers French cooking, if I recall correctly." Thomas nodded and hurried off. Clarissa set the staff into motion with the practiced deficiency of a general deploying troops. By 2 o'clock, the green suite was immaculate. Fresh flowers adorned every surface, and the kitchen smelled of herbs and roasting meat. At 3, a carriage arrived. But instead of the formal procession she'd expected, Christopher Hale simply burst through the front door like a warm wind scattering dry leaves. "Good God, this place is exactly as gloomy as I remembered," he laughed, spinning to take in the grand hall. "Adrian, where are you hiding, you old stick?" The Duke emerged from his study, his expression tight. "Christopher, you didn't mention you were coming." "I did. You don't read your letters." Christopher spotted Clarissa standing near the staircase and stopped. His whole face changed, lit up like someone had opened shutters in a dark room. "Well, you must be Miss Whitmore." She blinked, startled. "Yes, Mr. Hale." He crossed to her in 3 long strides and took her hand, not to kiss it, but to shake it firmly like she was an equal. "Christopher, please. I've heard you're the only reason this house hasn't collapsed into ruin during my brother's absences. Is that true?" "I manage the household, sir." "She's being modest." He turned to Adrian. "Why didn't you tell me you had someone this capable running things? I pictured some ancient dragon of a housekeeper." Adrian's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Miss Whitmore fulfills her duties adequately." "Adequately?" Christopher laughed again. "Adrian, I've been here 3 minutes and I can already tell this place runs like a Swiss watch. Give credit where it's due." For the first time in 6 years, the Duke actually looked at Clarissa. Really looked. His dark eyes met hers for a full second before sliding away again. "I have work to attend to." He turned back toward his study. "Of course you do," Christopher called after him. "You always do." He shook his head, then smiled at Clarissa again. "Well, Miss Whitmore, since my brother is determined to be antisocial, perhaps you could show me to my rooms. And then I'd love to hear how you've managed to keep this place standing. I suspect there are stories." Clarissa felt something strange and unfamiliar stirring in her chest. It took her a moment to identify it. Someone was seeing her. "Of course, Mr. Hale, if you'll follow me." As she led him upstairs, Christopher kept up a running commentary about his travels, about the weather, about the ridiculous portrait of their great-uncle in the East Gallery. "He looks like he's digesting something unpleasant, doesn't he?" And every few sentences, he asked her a question. What did she think of the new agricultural methods some estates were trying? Had she read the latest novel everyone in London was talking about? Did she ride? Did she play cards? Questions. As if her thoughts mattered, as if she were a person with opinions and interests rather than a convenient mechanism for household management. By the time they reached the green suite, Clarissa felt dizzy. It was like being pulled from underwater, sudden air, sudden light, sudden existence. "This is wonderful, thank you." Christopher looked around the room with genuine pleasure. "You've thought of everything, haven't you? Even my favorite soap." "How did you know?" "I pay attention, sir." "Christopher," he corrected gently. And I can see that you do. I imagine very little escapes your notice. She should have made some modest deflection and excused herself. That was the script, but something reckless rose in her throat. Very little, Mr. Christopher, including the 3 bottles of 1798 Bordeaux that have gone missing from the cellar. His eyebrows shot up. The estate manager. Mr. Pemberton enjoys a drink in the evenings. And my brother doesn't know? I haven't mentioned it. Why not? The question hung in the air between them. Why not indeed? Because she'd learned that speaking up meant being dismissed? Because being useful but silent was safer than being right but noticed? Because it seemed unimportant, she said finally. Christopher studied her with those warm brown eyes, and she had the uncomfortable feeling he could read everything she wasn't saying. Well, he said quietly, I think you're wasted here, Miss Whitmore. But I'm very glad you're here nonetheless. This place would be unbearable without someone intelligent to talk to. He smiled at her then, a real smile with no agenda behind it, and Clarissa felt the ground shift beneath her feet. This, she thought, is dangerous. This is how you forget you're supposed to be invisible. Over the following week, the estate transformed. Not physically, it looked the same as always, but the atmosphere changed, like someone had opened all the windows and let fresh air rush through rooms that had been sealed for years. Christopher was everywhere. He rode with the Duke in the mornings and debated politics with him over dinner. He charmed the servants until even Mrs. Dalton softened. He reorganized the library for fun and challenged Clarissa to games of chess in the evenings. And he talked to her. Not at her, not around her, but to her like she was a person worth knowing. What do you think about the Corn Laws? He asked one evening as they sat in the small parlor, a chessboard between them. Clarissa moved her knight. I think they protect wealthy landowners at the expense of everyone else. Exactly! He leaned forward excitedly. That's what I keep telling Adrian, but he's so caught up in maintaining the old order that he can't see— He stopped himself. Sorry, I shouldn't complain about my brother to you. Why not? It's a fair criticism. Because you work for him. I work for the estate. There's a difference. Christopher grinned. Check. She'd been so focused on the conversation she'd missed the trap. She studied the board, then smiled despite herself. Well played. You weren't concentrating. I was concentrating on the wrong thing. Story of my life, he said, but there was something in his voice that made her look up. He was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. You know, when I first came here, I thought you were just efficient, competent. But you're not, are you? You're brilliant, and you're hiding it. Her heart stuttered. I'm not hiding anything. Yes, you are. You're hiding yourself. Why? Because being seen is dangerous. Because being brilliant gets you nowhere when you're a woman with no money and no family. Because the world doesn't reward intelligence in people it's decided don't matter. But she didn't say any of that. She just moved her queen and smiled. Checkmate. Christopher blinked down at the board, then burst out laughing. How did I not see that coming? You were concentrating on the wrong thing. Their eyes met, and something crackled in the air between them, something warm and dangerous and impossible. The door opened. Adrian stood in the doorway, still in his riding clothes, his face unreadable. The hour is late, he said flatly. Miss Whitmore should retire. It wasn't a suggestion. Clarissa rose immediately, the spell broken. Of course, Your Grace. Good night, Christopher. Good night, Miss Whitmore. She slipped past the Duke, feeling his eyes on her back like a physical weight. As she climbed the stairs, she heard Christopher's voice, sharp with irritation. Must you treat her like a servant? She is a servant. She's family. Distant, perhaps, but family nonetheless. And she's certainly more than— The door closed, cutting off the rest of the argument. Clarissa stood on the landing, her hands trembling. Family. Christopher had called her family. Adrian had called her a servant. Both were wrong, both were right. She was neither and both and nothing at all. That night, she wrote in her journal by candlelight, Something is breaking. I feel it like ice cracking underfoot that moment before you fall through. Christopher sees me, and I can no longer pretend I'm content being invisible. But worse, far worse, the Duke is starting to notice too. Not me, exactly, but the fact that someone else does. I am becoming visible, and I don't know if I'm strong enough to survive it. The next morning, Adrian summoned her to his study. She entered to find him standing at the window, hands clasped behind his back, every line of his body rigid. Miss Whitmore, how long have you been managing this estate? 6 years, Your Grace. And in that time, has my brother visited before? An odd question. Once, Your Grace, briefly, several years ago. I see. He turned to face her, and for the first time she saw something besides indifference in his eyes. It looked almost like discomfort. I wanted to. That is, I've been reviewing the household accounts. Here it comes, she thought. He's found some excuse to dismiss me, to remove the complication. The management has been... He paused, as if the words pained him. Exemplary. The estate runs more efficiently now than it did under the previous managers. The costs are lower. The staff is more stable. I wanted to acknowledge that. Clarissa stared at him. In 6 years, he'd never once praised her work, never once indicated he even noticed it. Thank you, Your Grace. My brother seems to value your company. There it was, the real reason for this conversation. Mister, Christopher is very kind, Your Grace. He's impulsive. He forms enthusiasms quickly and abandons them just as fast. Adrian's eyes fixed on her with uncomfortable intensity. I would not want you to mistake his attention for something more than it is. The words hit like a slap. He thought she was... what? Developing inappropriate feelings for Christopher? Setting her sights above her station? Pride flared hot in her chest, burning away years of careful deference. I assure you, Your Grace, I understand my position perfectly. I have no illusions about my prospects, nor any intentions beyond fulfilling my duties to this household. Good. But he didn't look satisfied. He looked frustrated. That will be all. She curtsied and left, her spine straight as an iron rod. How dare he? How dare he spend 6 years treating her like furniture, then suddenly decide to notice her only to warn her away from the first person who'd shown her basic human kindness. She was halfway to the kitchen before she realized her hands were shaking, not with hurt, but with fury. And underneath the fury, something else. Something that whispered, he's jealous. No, that was impossible. The Duke had never shown the slightest interest in her as anything other than a useful mechanism. This was just him protecting his brother, maintaining the proper social order, ensuring the servant didn't get ideas above her station. But the thought, once planted, wouldn't leave. Christopher found her in the garden that afternoon, cutting flowers for the dining room. There you are. I've been looking everywhere. He dropped onto the bench beside her, his usual cheerfulness dimmed. Adrian's in one of his moods. Did he speak to you this morning? Briefly. About me? She hesitated, then nodded. Christopher swore under his breath. He warned you off, didn't he? Told you I'm unreliable, that you shouldn't take my attention seriously? Something like that. Clarissa. He stopped himself. May I call you Clarissa? Yes. Clarissa, my brother is an idiot. A brilliant idiot with a sense of duty the size of England, but an idiot nonetheless. He doesn't understand that people can simply like each other, that not every interaction has to be calculated for advantage. And is that what we are? People who simply like each other? The question came out sharper than she intended. Christopher studied her carefully. I think we could be friends, he said quietly. Real friends. If you'd allow it. I know it's complicated. I know the world doesn't look kindly on friendships that cross certain lines. But I also know that you're one of the most interesting people I've met in years, and I'd like to know you better. As a person, not as my brother's household manager. Friendship. He was offering friendship. It should have been safe, uncomplicated. So why did her heart ache like he'd offered something far more dangerous? I'd like that too, she said. His whole face lit up. Excellent. Then let's scandalize the neighborhood. Come riding with me tomorrow, not as servant and master, but as friends. Christopher. Say yes, Clarissa. Just once. Do something for yourself instead of for this house, or my brother, or anyone else. And because she was tired of being invisible, because she was angry at Adrian's presumption, because Christopher's smile made her feel alive for the first time in years. "Yes," she said. His whoop of joy startled a flock of birds from the nearby trees. Neither of them noticed the Duke watching from his study window, his face carved from stone. The ice was cracking, and all of them were about to fall through. The morning ride changed everything, though Clarissa didn't realize it at first. She met Christopher at the stables just after dawn, wearing her oldest riding habit, dark green wool that had seen better days but still fit well enough. He was already there, holding the reins of 2 horses, grinning like a schoolboy about to skip class. "I wasn't sure you'd come. I said I would." People say a lot of things. He handed her the reins of a beautiful chestnut mare. "This is Artemis. She's gentle but spirited, like someone else I know." Clarissa ran her hand along the mare's neck, feeling the warmth of the animal beneath her palm. "When's the last time you rode?" Christopher asked. "Years." She swung into the saddle with less grace than she would have liked, but she made it. "My father taught me when I was young." "Then let's see if you remember." They rode out across the estate grounds, past the formal gardens, and into the open fields beyond. The morning air was crisp and clean, the sky just beginning to lighten at the edges. For the first few minutes, Clarissa concentrated on finding her rhythm, relearning the feel of a horse beneath her. Then Christopher kicked his mount into a gallop, and without thinking, she followed. The wind tore at her hair, pulled pins loose, sent her carefully arranged bun tumbling down her back. She should have cared. She should have worried about appearing improper, disheveled, undignified. She didn't care at all. They raced across the meadow like children, laughing, alive. When they finally slowed near a line of oak trees, Clarissa was breathless and exhilarated and completely, utterly free. "You're a better rider than you let on," Christopher said, his own hair wild from the wind. "I used to be, before—" She stopped. "Before your life fell apart?" The bluntness should have offended her. Instead, it was a relief. No dancing around the truth. No pretending her circumstances were anything but what they were. "Yes." They dismounted and walked the horses through the trees. Christopher pulled an apple from his pocket and fed it to his gelding, then offered another to Artemis. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "You're going to anyway." He smiled. "True. Why do you stay here? You're clearly capable of much more than managing my brother's household. You could be a governess, a companion to some wealthy widow. Hell, you could probably run half the estates in England better than their owners do. Those positions require references, connections, things I don't have. You have my brother's estate running like clockwork. That's a reference. From a man who barely acknowledges I exist?" She shook her head. "Besides, Christopher, you're not naive. You know how the world works. A woman alone with no family, no fortune, no husband. I'm lucky to have this much. At least here I have a roof over my head and food in my belly. At least here I'm—" She caught herself. "Useful?" The word landed like a stone in still water. "Yes," she said quietly. "Useful." Christopher was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was gentle. "You should be more than useful, Clarissa. You should be valued, celebrated. You're wasted here." "Maybe, but wasted is better than starving." "Is it?" She didn't have an answer for that. They rode back slowly, the easy joy of the morning tempered by the conversation's weight. As they approached the stables, Clarissa saw a figure standing in the doorway of the main house, watching them. Adrian. Even from a distance, she could feel his disapproval like a physical thing. Christopher saw him too. He's going to be insufferable about this. Then perhaps we shouldn't give him reason to be. Clarissa dismounted and handed Artemis's reins to the stable boy. "Thank you for the ride, Mr. Hale. It was lovely." "Mr. Hale?" Christopher caught her arm gently. "We're back to that?" "We never left it." She met his eyes. "Whatever you think we are, Christopher, whatever you'd like us to be, the world won't allow it. Your brother knows that. I know that. You should know it too." She walked away before he could respond, her hair still loose down her back, her cheeks still flushed from the ride. As she passed Adrian in the doorway, she felt his gaze follow her like a searchlight. "Miss Whitmore?" She stopped. "Your Grace?" "In the future, when you require exercise, perhaps you might confine yourself to the gardens." The dismissal was clear, the insult clearer. Something hot and reckless surged in her chest. Of course, Your Grace. I'll be sure to ask your permission before breathing as well. His eyes widened fractionally, the most surprise she'd ever seen him show. She curtsied and left before he could respond, her heart hammering against her ribs. What had she done? You didn't speak to the Duke of Ashwell like that. You didn't challenge him, mock him, throw his control back in his face. But she'd been invisible for 6 years, and now someone saw her, and she was damned if she'd let Adrian Hale shove her back into the shadows just because it made him uncomfortable. The consequences came swiftly. That afternoon, Mrs. Dalton summoned her to the housekeeper's sitting room. The older woman's face was pinched with vindictive pleasure. His Grace has requested that you take your meals in the servants' hall from now on. Clarissa went very still. For 6 years, she'd taken her meals in the small breakfast room off the kitchen, a middle ground between the servants' hall and the family dining room. It was a tacit acknowledgement of her ambiguous position. Now Adrian was clarifying that position. Servant, nothing more. I see. Thank you for informing me, Mrs. Dalton. And he wishes you to confine your duties to household management. No more working in the library or the study. Those are family spaces. Of course. Mrs. Dalton looked almost disappointed that Clarissa didn't argue. That will be all. Clarissa left the room with her head high and her hands steady, but inside she was shaking. This was punishment for the ride, for speaking back to him, for daring to exist outside the narrow box he'd assigned her. She should have expected it. She should have known that visibility came with a price. At dinner that night, which she took in the servants' hall, surrounded by people who'd once treated her as something more than their equal, but now watched her demotion with poorly concealed satisfaction, Thomas slipped her a note. Meet me in the blue drawing room at 9. See, she should have ignored it. She should have known that meeting Christopher would only make things worse. She went anyway. He was pacing when she arrived, his usually cheerful face tight with anger. Do you know what he's done? Christopher demanded. Do you know he's banished you to the servants' hall like you're some scullery maid? I'm aware. And you're just accepting it? What choice do I have? Clarissa closed the door behind her. He's the Duke. This is his house. I'm here by his sufferance, and he's made it clear that sufferance has limits. This is because of me. Because we rode together. This is because your brother is a controlling bastard who can't stand anyone disrupting his carefully ordered world. The words hung in the air between them. She'd never said anything like that out loud before. Never let the anger show. Christopher stared at her, then started to laugh. There she is, the real Clarissa, under all that careful composure. The real Clarissa knows when to keep her mouth shut. Maybe she's been quiet too long. He crossed to her, his expression serious. Come to London with me. What? When I leave here. Come with me. I have friends, connections. I can help you find a position, something better than this. You don't have to stay here and let Adrian treat you like what I am? She shook her head. Christopher, I appreciate the offer, truly, but I can't just leave. I have no money. No, I'll help you. And then what? I become your charity case? Your project? The words came out harsher than she intended. I've been dependent on other people's kindness my whole life. It never ends well. This is different. Is it? Or are you just another man who sees a problem he thinks he can fix? She saw him flinch and felt a pang of guilt. I'm sorry, that was unfair. You've been nothing but kind to me. But Christopher, you need to understand, I can't be rescued. I can only survive. And right now, this is survival. It's not survival, it's slow death. The truth of it hit her like a fist to the chest. Before she could respond, the door opened. Adrian stood in the doorway, his face a mask of cold fury. Miss Whitmore, you were instructed to confine yourself to household duties. I was delivering a message to Mr. Christopher, she lied smoothly. At 9 o'clock at night, in a closed room? His eyes moved between them. How convenient. Adrian, for God's sake, shit, Christopher started. I believe Miss Whitmore was just leaving. Adrian's voice could have frozen water. Weren't you, Miss Whitmore? She should have apologized. She should have curtsied and fled. Instead, she looked him directly in the eye. Yes, Your Grace, Though I wonder what you think might happen in a closed room that threatens you so much. Are you afraid I might corrupt your brother, or are you afraid he might see me as something more than a useful servant?" The silence that followed was deafening. Adrian's jaw worked, his hands clenched at his sides. For a moment she thought he might actually lose that legendary control. "Get out," he said quietly. She went. But as she climbed the stairs to her room, she heard Christopher's voice raised in anger for the first time since he'd arrived. "What the hell is wrong with you? With me? You're the one sniffing around the help like some—" "Don't!" Christopher's voice went dangerous. "Don't you dare finish that sentence. Clarissa is worth 10 of most people in our social circle, and you know it. You've always known it. You just chose to ignore her because actually seeing her might require you to feel something, and God forbid the Duke of Ashwell have feelings." "You don't understand." "No, you don't understand. I've watched you for years, Adrian. Watched you turn yourself into this stone monument to duty and responsibility. You've got no joy, no warmth, no life in you at all. And now someone comes along who's brilliant and capable and beautiful, and instead of appreciating what you have right here in your own house, you're punishing her for making you feel something. You're a coward." A door slammed. Clarissa stood frozen on the stairs, her heart racing. Beautiful. Christopher had called her beautiful. And Adrian, what had Adrian felt? She couldn't let herself think about that. Couldn't let herself wonder what it meant that the Duke had looked at her with something other than indifference for the first time in 6 years. She locked herself in her room and tried to sleep, but her mind wouldn't quiet. The next morning, everything was different. Adrian didn't emerge from his study. Christopher appeared at breakfast looking haggard and angry. And when Clarissa went to the kitchen to review the day's menu, she found Mrs. Dalton waiting with a cruel smile. "His Grace has decided to hire a new household manager," the housekeeper announced. "A Mr. Fitzwilliam, coming from the Earl of Somerset's estate. Very experienced, very capable. He'll be arriving next week to assume your duties." Clarissa's stomach dropped. "I see. You'll be reassigned to work under my direct supervision, mending mostly, light cleaning, the sort of work more suited to your position." It was a demotion, a humiliation, a message. Know your place or lose even that. Clarissa nodded calmly. "Thank you for informing me, Mrs. Dalton." She walked out of the kitchen with her spine straight, made it to the linen closet, and only then did she let herself feel the full weight of what had just happened. 6 years. 6 years of running this estate flawlessly, of turning chaos into order, of being indispensable. And Adrian was replacing her because she dared to be seen. She pressed her palms against the cool wall and breathed slowly, fighting down the panic. What would she do? Where would she go? Without a reference from the Duke, she'd never find another position. She'd be lucky to get work as a scullery maid. Unless... Christopher's offer echoed in her mind. "Come to London with me." It was reckless. It was improper. It would ruin what little reputation she had left. But what did reputation matter if she was going to end up destitute anyway? She was still standing there, trying to calm her racing thoughts, when Thomas found her. "Miss, you're needed in the blue drawing room. Mr. Christopher's asking for you." She found Christopher standing by the window, looking out over the gardens. He turned when she entered, and his face was grim. "He told you?" "About Mr. Fitzwilliam?" "Yes." "I'm sorry, Clarissa. I didn't think he'd—" He ran a hand through his hair. "This is my fault. I pushed too hard. I made him see you, and now he's punishing you for it." "No." She shook her head. "This was always going to happen. I was never going to be allowed to stay invisible and important. The world doesn't work that way for women like me." "Then leave with me. I'm going back to London tomorrow. Come with me." "Christopher, I know what you're going to say. But listen to me. I have a friend, Lady Pemberton. She's a widow, wealthy, with a house in Mayfair and no patience for society's rules. She's been looking for a companion, someone intelligent, someone she can actually talk to. It's a real position, with a real salary. I can recommend you. She'll trust my judgment." Clarissa's heart raced. A real position, a real salary, a way out. "Why?" she asked. "Why are you doing this for me?" Christopher crossed to her, took her hands in his. "Because you deserve better than this. Because I've spent 2 weeks watching you be brilliant and capable and invisible, and it's breaking my heart. Because he stopped, seemed to struggle with something. Because when I look at you, I see someone I could. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. The air between them was charged, electric. Clarissa knew she should step back, should put distance between them, should remember all the 1,000 reasons this was impossible. Instead, she said, "I'll come." Christopher's face lit up like sunrise. "You will?" "I will, but Christopher, I need you to understand, I'm not coming because I have feelings for you. I'm coming because I'm drowning here, and you're offering me a lifeline. That's all this is." "I know." But something in his eyes said he hoped it might become more. "When do we leave?" "Dawn. Pack light. I'll arrange everything else." She nodded and turned to go, but he caught her hand. "Clarissa, thank you for trusting me." "Don't thank me yet," she said. "We still have to get out of here without your brother stopping us." That night, Clarissa packed her meager belongings into a single trunk, her clothes, her books, her journal. The sum total of 6 years at Ashwell Park fit into one piece of luggage. She was folding her last dress when her door opened without a knock. Adrian stood in the doorway, still in his evening clothes, his face unreadable. "You're leaving." Not a question. Somehow he knew. "Yes." "With Christopher?" "Yes." He stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. It was wildly inappropriate. A man alone in a woman's bedroom, but Clarissa was past caring about propriety. "Do you have any idea what you're doing?" Adrian's voice was tight, controlled. "The scandal this will cause? What people will assume? I imagine they'll assume what you're assuming right now, that I'm running away to become your brother's mistress." She met his eyes squarely. "They'll be wrong, but that won't matter, will it? The truth never matters when people have already decided what to think. Then why do it?" "Because you're replacing me. Because you're sending me to mend sheets and scrub floors. Because I have spent 6 years being useful and invisible, and I'm tired of both." Her voice rose despite herself. "You want to know why I'm leaving? Because you made it clear I have no future here. So I'm making my own future elsewhere. I could give you a reference, help you find another position. Could you? Or would you give me the same kind of reference you'd give any other servant, adequate, dutiful, knows her place?" She shook her head. "I don't want your help, Your Grace. I want to be somewhere I'm valued for my mind, not just my ability to manage a household you can't be bothered to care about." Something flashed in his eyes, pain maybe, or anger. "You think I don't care about this estate? I think you care about duty and responsibility and maintaining the proper order of things. I think you care about looking like you have everything under control. But actually caring? Actually seeing the people around you as human beings with their own needs and desires? No. You don't do that. And my brother does? Christopher sees me," she said simply. "For 6 years you looked through me. He looked at me. That's the difference." Adrian was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was different, quieter, rawer. "I saw you." "What?" "I saw you." He took a step closer. "Every day, every time you fixed something I'd broken or managed some crisis I'd ignored or kept this place running while I was in London. I saw you, I just—" He stopped, his jaw working. "I didn't know what to do with it." Clarissa's breath caught. "With what?" "With you. With the fact that the most capable, intelligent, infuriating woman I'd ever met was living under my roof, and I had no right to—" He cut himself off. "It doesn't matter now." "No right to what?" "To want you." The words dropped between them like a bomb. Clarissa stared at him, her mind reeling. Want? Adrian Hale wanted her? The man who'd spent 6 years treating her like furniture, who just this week demoted her to punish her for existing. He wanted her? "You have a hell of a way of showing it," she said finally. "I know." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I'm not like Christopher. I don't know how to charm people, how to make them feel seen and valued. I only know duty and responsibility and maintaining control. And when I realized I was losing control around you, I did what I always do. I tried to put more distance between us. By replacing me. By protecting myself. He met her eyes. By protecting you. From what? From me. From what people would say if I... He stopped. From the fact that I'm a duke and you're a nobody. A woman I have no right to touch. His voice went rough. A woman who deserves someone who can give her the world, not just a cold house and a title that comes with more restrictions than freedoms. Clarissa's throat was tight. This was absurd. Impossible. Adrian Hale, the Duke of Ashwell, standing in her bedroom confessing he wanted her, and yet, "So you'd rather let Christopher have me?" she asked. Pain flashed across his face. "I'd rather you be happy." "And you think Christopher can make me happy?" "I think he can give you things I can't. Freedom, joy, a life that isn't suffocated by expectations and social rules." "What if I don't want those things?" The words came out before she could stop them. "What if I want someone who sees beneath the surface, someone who understands what it's like to be trapped by circumstances you can't control, someone who—" She stopped herself, but it was too late. Adrian was looking at her like he'd never seen her before. Like all his careful walls had just crumbled. "Don't," he said quietly. He said, "Don't say things you don't mean." "I never say things I don't mean. You should know that by now." They stood there, the air between them crackling with 6 years of unspoken tension. Clarissa's heart was hammering so hard she could barely breathe. Adrian took a step toward her, then another, until he was close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes, could feel the heat radiating from his body. "If you stay," he said, his voice low and dangerous, "everything changes. If I stay, you'll go back to ignoring me the moment I become inconvenient." "No." His hand came up, cupped her cheek with a gentleness that shocked her. "If you stay, I promise you, I will never ignore you again." She should have stepped back, should have reminded him about propriety and social rules and all the 1,000 reasons this was impossible. Instead, she leaned into his touch. "Promises are easy to make in the middle of the night. Then let me prove it to you." His thumb brushed across her cheekbone. "Stay. Give me a chance to be better than I've been, to be the man who deserves you. And if you fail, then you can leave with my blessing and a reference that will open any door in England." His eyes searched hers. "But Clarissa, if you leave now, if you go with Christopher without giving me a chance, I won't stop you, but I'll regret it for the rest of my life." The confession broke something open in her chest. She was going to say yes. She could feel it rising in her throat. "Yes, I'll stay. Yes, I'll give you a chance. Yes." The door burst open. Christopher stood there, his face stricken. "Clarissa, He stopped, taking in the scene. His brother. The intimate distance. The way Adrian's hand was still touching her face. "Chris," Adrian said. "Don't." Christopher's voice was cold. "I came to make sure you were ready to leave tomorrow. I can see you've reconsidered." "Christopher, it's not—" Clarissa started. "It's exactly what it looks like." He looked at his brother with something like betrayal. "You couldn't stand that she saw me, that she might choose me. So you came here to, what? Seduce her? Offer her whatever lies you needed to keep her here?" "They're not lies," Adrian said quietly. "Aren't they? 2 days ago you were replacing her. Now you're in her bedroom making promises?" Christopher shook his head. "You don't want her, Adrian. You just can't stand losing." "That's not true." "Then prove it." Christopher's eyes blazed. "Let her go. If you actually care about her happiness instead of your pride, let her leave." Adrian's hand dropped from Clarissa's face. She felt the loss of his touch like a physical ache. "Is that what you want?" Adrian asked her quietly. "To go with him?" And there it was. The choice she'd been avoiding. Christopher, who saw her, who offered freedom and friendship and maybe something more, who made her laugh and feel alive. Or Adrian, who'd ignored her for 6 years but now stood before her offering promises and possibilities, who understood duty and burden and the weight of impossible choices. She looked between the two brothers, both watching her, both waiting. She started. A knock on the door. Mrs. Dalton's voice, sharp and scandalized. "Miss Whitmore, are you aware there are men in your room at this hour?" The three of them froze. "This is highly inappropriate," Mrs. Dalton continued, her voice carrying down the hall. "I'm fetching the other staff. This behavior cannot stand. Clarissa's stomach dropped. This was it, the scandal she'd been trying to avoid. Within minutes, the entire household would know that both the Duke and his brother had been in her bedroom. Her reputation, what little she had, would be destroyed, and with it, any choice she might have had about her future. Christopher moved first. Clarissa, come with me. Now. We can be gone before— No. Adrian's voice was hard. Archie says, running will only make it worse. Worse? Adrian, they're going to think— Let them think what they want. He turned to Clarissa, his face set. You have a decision to make. Right now. Stay and face this with me, or leave with Christopher and never look back. She could hear footsteps in the hall, voices, Mrs. Dalton rallying the troops. Stay and become the Duke's scandal. Leave and become the brother's disgrace. Either way, she was ruined. Unless— A wild, reckless idea formed in her mind. The kind of idea that came from 6 years of being careful and controlled and absolutely done with all of it. I have a third option, she said. Both brothers looked at her. She straightened her spine, lifted her chin, and walked to the door. Threw it open to find Mrs. Dalton and half the household staff gathered in the hallway, shocked and eager for scandal. Gentlemen, Clarissa said clearly, pitching her voice to Carrie, I believe we're finished here. His Grace and Mr. Christopher were kind enough to inform me personally of my dismissal and to discuss my future prospects. A courtesy I appreciate, though I understand how the late hour might appear improper to those with suspicious minds. She looked directly at Mrs. Dalton. I'll be leaving Ashwell Park tomorrow morning. I trust that satisfies everyone's concerns about propriety. The housekeeper's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Behind her, Clarissa heard Christopher's sharp intake of breath. Adrian's silence was thunderous. She'd just thrown away both choices, rejected both brothers publicly, chosen herself. Miss Whitmore, Adrian started. Good night, Your Grace. Mr. Christopher. She curtsied perfectly, her face a mask of calm composure. I appreciate everything you've both done for me. Then she closed the door in all their faces and turned the lock. Her hands were shaking. Her heart was racing. She'd just burned every bridge she had. But for the first time in 6 years, she'd made a choice that was entirely her own. And that, she thought as she sank onto her bed, was worth any price. She didn't sleep. How could she? Beyond her locked door, she could hear the whispers starting, spreading through the house like fire through dry grass. By morning, every servant would know. By afternoon, the neighboring estates would hear. By week's end, all of London society would be dissecting what happened in Clarissa Whitmore's bedroom the night both Hale brothers visited. The truth wouldn't matter. It never did. She sat by the window and watched the sky lighten from black to gray to pale gold. Somewhere in the house, Christopher would be packing. Somewhere else, Adrian would be doing whatever dukes did when their carefully controlled worlds cracked open. And she? She was about to walk out with nothing but a trunk and her pride. At dawn, she dressed in her traveling clothes, a simple gray dress, practical boots, her mother's old cloak. She braided her hair tightly, pinning it into a severe knot at the base of her skull. Armor. That's what this was. The last bits of protection she could muster. She carried her trunk down the servants' stairs herself, refusing to ask for help. The kitchen was already bustling, and the moment she appeared, the chatter died. Cook looked away. Annie stared at her feet. Only Thomas met her eyes, and the pity there was worse than the judgment. Miss, he said quietly, can I help you with that? No, thank you, Thomas. I can manage. Where will you go? Good question. She'd rejected Christopher's offer publicly. She'd refused Adrian's promises. She had approximately £40 saved from 6 years of service, barely enough for a month's room and board in London, if she was careful. I'll find something, she said, because admitting she had no plan felt like defeat. She was halfway to the front door when Adrian appeared at the top of the main staircase. Miss Whitmore? She stopped but didn't turn around. Your Grace, we need to talk. I believe we said everything necessary last night. Clarissa. Miss Whitmore, she corrected sharply. She finally looked at him. He was still in yesterday's clothes, rumpled and exhausted. Good. Let him feel a fraction of what she'd felt all night. If you'll excuse me, I have a coach to catch. There's no coach until noon. Then I'll walk to the village and wait. In And the rain? She hadn't even noticed it was raining. She looked toward the windows and saw water streaming down the glass. Of course it was raining. If necessary. Adrian descended the stairs with measured steps, each one deliberate. When he reached her, he was close enough that she could smell coffee and something else. Anxiety, maybe. Fear. Stay, he said. Please. Just for breakfast. Let you what? Explain? Apologize? Make more promises you'll break the moment it becomes inconvenient? She shook her head. I'm done, Your Grace. Done being invisible. Done being useful. Done waiting for scraps of recognition from men who see me only when another man looks my way. That's not fair. Fair? She laughed, sharp and bitter. You want to talk about fair? I've managed your estate for 6 years. 6 years of turning chaos into order, of covering for your absences, of keeping everything running so smoothly you never had to think about it. And the moment I dared to exist as something more than a convenient mechanism, you tried to erase me entirely. I was wrong. Yes, you were. But being wrong doesn't fix anything. She picked up her trunk. Goodbye, Your Grace. I hope Mr. Fitzwilliam serves you well. She made it 3 steps before his voice stopped her again. I canceled Fitzwilliam. Clarissa froze. I sent the letter yesterday afternoon, before I came to your room. He won't be coming. The position is still yours if you want it. She turned slowly. You canceled him? Yes. Why? Because Christopher was right. I was punishing you for making me feel something, and that was... He seemed to struggle with the word. Cruel. You deserved better. You deserve better. And you think offering me back the job you took away makes up for it? No, I think it's a start. He moved closer. Clarissa, I've spent my entire life learning to control everything, my emotions, my desires, my household. Control is survival when you're responsible for thousands of people and generations of legacy. But you, he stopped, you make me want to lose control. And that terrified me. Despite herself, despite everything, she felt something shift in her chest. Adrian, let me finish, please. He took a breath. If you stay, I won't ask you to be invisible anymore. I won't ask you to be just useful. He seemed to be choosing words carefully. I'll see you, really see you, every day, and I'll try to be worthy of being seen by you. It was the most vulnerable she'd ever heard him, the most human, and it wasn't enough. I can't, she said quietly. I can't stay here and wait for you to decide if I'm worth the risk to your reputation. I can't build my life around hoping you'll be brave enough to... She cut herself off. I need to be more than someone's maybe. Then what do you need? The question landed like a challenge. What did she need? Security? Respect? Love? All of the above and none of them, because she'd spent so long not having any of it that she barely remembered what wanting felt like. I need to know I can survive on my own, she said finally. Before I can tie myself to anyone else, you, Christopher, anyone, I need to know I can stand alone. Adrian nodded slowly. Then go. She blinked. What? Go. To London, to anywhere you want. Prove to yourself that you can survive. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded paper. Here. She took it automatically. It was a letter of reference, dated and signed. Miss Clarissa Whitmore has served as household manager at Ashwell Park for 6 years. Her intelligence, capability, and integrity are beyond reproach. She has managed complex estates with exceptional skill and would be an asset to any household. I recommend her without reservation. Adrian Hale, Duke of Ashwell. Her throat tightened. You wrote this? Last night, after you locked the door. He smiled slightly. I told you, I saw you. I just didn't know how to say it until you were leaving. Adrian, take it, use it, find your footing, and when you're ready to come back, the door will be open. The position will be yours, not as charity, not as pity, as what you earned. Clarissa stared at the letter, at the words that could open doors she'd thought permanently closed. A reference from a duke, a genuine one, acknowledging her worth. It was everything she needed, and it made leaving so much harder. Thank you, she whispered. Clarissa. The front door burst open. Christopher stood there, drenched from the rain, his face wild. Don't do this, he said. Don't let him convince you to leave. Stay and fight. Chris, Adrian said tiredly, this isn't your— The hell it isn't. Christopher strode forward. Clarissa, he's giving you that letter so you'll go away, so he doesn't have to deal with the scandal of actually caring about someone below his station. Don't fall for it. That's not why— Adrian started. Isn't it? You're a coward, Adrian. You always have been. You hide behind duty and propriety because actually fighting for what you want might cost you something. And you think you're better? Adrian's voice went cold. You, who've spent your whole life running from responsibility? At least I stay and face my obligations. Obligations? Christopher laughed harshly. Is that what she is to you? An obligation? Stop it, Clarissa said. Neither man heard her. I never said— You didn't have to. It's written all over your face. You want her, but you won't fight for her because it might be complicated. Might require you to actually feel something. And you'd fight for her? Adrian stepped closer to his brother. Or would you just take her to London, install her in some nice position with your widow friend, and visit when convenient? Don't pretend you're offering her anything more substantial than I am. At least I'm offering her freedom. You're offering her dependence on your goodwill. That's not freedom. Enough! Clarissa's voice cracked through the hall like a whip. Both brothers turned to stare at her. I am standing right here, she said, her voice shaking with fury. Right here. And you're talking about me like I'm a prize to be won or a problem to be solved. Both of you. Clarissa, they said in unison. No, you don't get to speak right now. She looked between them, these two men who'd disrupted her carefully maintained invisibility, who'd made her want things she'd taught herself not to want. Christopher, you see me. I know that. You've been kind and genuine, and I'm grateful, but you also want to rescue me. And I don't need rescuing. I need to rescue myself. Christopher's face fell, but he nodded. She turned to Adrian. And you spent 6 years ignoring me, then 1 week punishing me for existing, and now you want me to believe you've changed? That you're suddenly ready to risk your reputation and your control for me? Yes, Adrian said simply. I don't believe you. The words hung between them, brutal and honest. Adrian flinched like she'd struck him. Then what will make you believe? Time? Distance? Proof? She folded the reference letter carefully and tucked it into her cloak. I'm leaving. I'm going to London. I'm going to find work and a place to live and a life that's mine. And if you still feel this way in 6 months, if you still think I'm worth the risk and the scandal and the disruption to your perfectly ordered world, then maybe we can talk. 6 months, Adrian repeated. Or longer. However long it takes for me to know I'm staying because I want to, not because I have no other choice. She picked up her trunk and walked toward the door. Christopher stepped aside. Adrian didn't move. Clarissa, he said as she passed, I will wait. However long it takes. She paused in the doorway, rain blowing in around her. Don't wait for me, Adrian. Live your life. And if our paths cross again, we'll see what happens. Then she walked out into the rain. The village was 3 miles away. The trunk grew heavier with each step. The rain soaked through her cloak within minutes. Her boots squelched in the mud. She was cold and wet and terrified and more alive than she'd felt in years. She was halfway to the village when she heard hoofbeats behind her. She didn't turn around. If it was Christopher trying one more time to convince her to accept his help, or Adrian coming to make more promises. But it was Thomas who rode up beside her, leading a second horse. Thought you might need this, miss, he said, his face carefully neutral. Can't have you walking all the way in this weather. Clarissa stared at him, then at the horse. Thomas, His Grace asked me to bring it, said to tell you it's yours, bought and paid for. Not a loan, a gift, no strings. A horse. Adrian had given her a horse, not to keep her, not to bind her, but to help her go. She felt something crack open in her chest. Thank you, Thomas. He helped her secure the trunk and mount. As she gathered the reins, he cleared his throat. For what it's worth, miss, I think you're doing the right thing, leaving, figuring out what you want before you let anyone else decide for you. He smiled slightly. But I also think you'll be back. And when you are, this place will be waiting. How can you be so sure? Because the house already feels empty without you. And His Grace looks like a man who just realized what he lost. Thomas tipped his hat. Safe travels, Miss Whitmore. He rode back toward the estate, leaving her alone on the muddy road. Clarissa sat for a moment, feeling the rain on her face, the horse steady beneath her. Then she turned toward London and rode. The city swallowed her whole. London was noise and chaos, and 1,000 people who didn't know her name and didn't care to learn it. She found lodging in a boarding house in Bloomsbury, a narrow room with a slanted ceiling and a window that looked onto a brick wall. It cost more than she wanted to spend, but it was clean and the landlady asked no uncomfortable questions. The first week she lived on bread and cheese and walked until her feet blistered, familiarizing herself with the streets. The second week she began calling on households, presenting Adrian's letter of reference, offering her services. Half of them dismissed her before she finished speaking. A woman alone managing an estate? Impossible. Inappropriate. Suspicious. The other half offered her positions so far beneath her skills it was insulting. Lady's maid, governess for unruly children, companion to elderly women who wanted servants but paid companion wages. She said no to all of them. By the third week, her savings were dwindling. She started eating one meal a day, started eyeing the cheaper boarding houses in rougher neighborhoods, started wondering if pride was a luxury she couldn't afford. She was sitting in her room, calculating how many more weeks she could survive, when someone knocked on her door. Miss Whitmore, you have a visitor. Clarissa's heart jumped. Adrian? Christopher? But neither of them knew where she was staying. She descended to the front parlor to find a woman in her 50s, elegantly dressed, with sharp eyes and a sharper smile. Miss Whitmore, I'm Lady Pemberton, the widow, Christopher's friend. Clarissa's stomach sank. Mr. Christopher sent you. He did not. I came because I received an interesting letter from the Duke of Ashwell. Lady Pemberton settled into a chair without invitation. He asked if I might have use for someone of your talents, gave me your direction. Also gave me the most extraordinary character reference I've ever read. He called you brilliant, capable, and indispensable. Coming from Adrian Hale, that's practically a declaration of love. Lady Pemberton, I appreciate your time, but I'm not interested in... Don't be foolish, child. Sit down and listen. Something in the woman's tone made Clarissa obey. I am a widow of independent means and independent mind, Lady Pemberton said. I have no patience for simpering girls or yes-women. I need someone who can manage my household, handle my correspondence, and tell me when I'm being ridiculous. The position pays £60 a year plus room and board in my Mayfair house. £60. More than twice what she'd hoped to find. Why would you offer me this? Because Adrian Hale doesn't write letters like that for just anyone. Because Christopher speaks highly of you. Yes, I've talked to him too. And because I've interviewed 17 women for this position, and they were all either idiots or sycophants. Lady Pemberton leaned forward. Are you an idiot or a sycophant, Miss Whitmore? No, ma'am. Good. Then we'll get along splendidly. Can you start Monday? Clarissa's head spun. This was it, the opportunity she'd been hoping for. Security, respect, a position that valued her mind, given to her by Adrian. Did he ask you to hire me? She asked. The Duke? He asked me to meet you. What I did after that was my own decision. Lady Pemberton's eyes softened slightly. He also asked me to tell you that this offer has no strings attached to him, that if you accept, you owe him nothing. His words, not mine. And what do you think? I think Adrian Hale is a fool who finally woke up to what he had and lost it. I think Christopher Hale is a charming rogue with more heart than sense. And I think you're a young woman trying to build a life on her own terms, which I respect immensely. She stood. The offer stands until Friday. After that, I'll hire someone else. Your choice, Miss Whitmore. She left in a rustle of silk and expensive perfume. Clarissa sat in the shabby parlor and tried to process what had just happened. Adrian had helped her. Without being asked. Without demanding anything in return. He'd kept his promise. He'd let her go, but he'd made sure she had somewhere safe to land. It should have made accepting easy. Instead, It made everything more complicated. She spent 3 days wrestling with the decision: accept and be forever wondering if she'd earned it or if Adrian had bought it for her. Refuse, and potentially end up destitute when her savings ran out. Pride or survival. The same choice, wearing different clothes. On Friday morning, she went to Lady Pemberton's house in Mayfair. The butler showed her into a drawing room that was twice the size of her entire boarding house. Lady Pemberton was reading by the window. A massive ginger cat sprawled across her lap. "Miss Whitmore, I wasn't sure you'd come." "Neither was I." Clarissa stayed standing. "I need to know the truth. Did the Duke ask you to hire me? Did he offer to pay my salary?" "Sit down, child." "Did he?" Lady Pemberton sighed. "He offered. I refused. I told him if I was going to hire you, it would be on my own terms, with my own money, for my own reasons. Whatever exists between you and Adrian is none of my business, but I won't be used as a pawn in someone else's chess game, no matter how noble the intentions." The honesty was startling and reassuring. "Thank you," Clarissa said. "So, will you accept the position?" Clarissa thought about the boarding house, the dwindling savings, the hunger that had become familiar. She thought about pride and survival and which one mattered more. She thought about Adrian's letter, his promise, his gift of a horse to help her leave. "Yes," she said. "I accept." Lady Pemberton smiled. "Excellent. You start Monday. Now before you go, I should warn you, there's a ball tonight at the Ashworth estate. I'm attending, and I'd like you to accompany me. Consider it part of your duties." "A ball?" "Yes. Meet my social circle. See how these things work. You'll need to understand the world I move in if you're going to manage my household." It made sense. It was reasonable. It was also terrifying. "Will the Duke be there?" Clarissa asked. "Almost certainly. He's friends with Lord Ashworth." Lady Pemberton's eyes gleamed. "Is that a problem?" "Yes. No. Maybe." "I can handle it," Clarissa said. "I'm sure you can. I'll have a dress sent to your lodgings. Be here by 8. Meg." The dress arrived that afternoon, midnight blue silk that fit like it had been made for her. Clarissa stared at it hanging in her shabby room, this beautiful thing that had no business being there. She almost didn't go. Almost sent a note saying she was ill, that she'd start Monday but couldn't do this tonight, but she'd spent 6 years being invisible. 6 years playing it safe. If she was going to build a new life, she needed to stop hiding from the old one. She wore the dress. She pinned her hair up with the few decent pins she had. She looked at herself in the cracked mirror and saw a stranger. Someone polished, elegant, almost beautiful. Someone who might belong in a ballroom. The ball was in full swing when they arrived. Hundreds of candles, thousands of flowers, music spilling out into the London night. Lady Pemberton swept through the crowd like a ship through water, introducing Clarissa to a dizzying array of lords and ladies and honorables. Everyone was polite, as no one recognized her name. To them, she was just Lady Pemberton's new companion, respectable enough, but unremarkable. She'd been there an hour, safely anonymous in the crowd, when she saw him. Adrian stood on the far side of the ballroom, talking to an older gentleman in military dress. He looked exactly as he always did, controlled, composed, every inch the Duke. Then he saw her. Everything stopped. The conversation, his careful composure, the distance he kept from everyone. He stared at her across the crowded room like she was the only person in it. Clarissa's breath caught. Lady Pemberton leaned close. "I should have mentioned Adrian and Christopher are both here. If you'd like to leave—" "No." Clarissa straightened her spine. "I'm fine." "Are you sure? Because Adrian's heading this way, and he looks like a man with a purpose." She was right. Adrian was crossing the ballroom, his eyes never leaving Clarissa's face. People stepped aside for him automatically. The privileges of rank. He stopped in front of her and bowed. "Miss Whitmore, Lady Pemberton." "Your Grace," Clarissa said, proud that her voice didn't shake. "I didn't know you'd be here." "Lady Pemberton was kind enough to include me." "It's not kindness," Lady Pemberton said. "She's my companion now. Where I go, she goes. You'll have to get used to seeing her, Adrian." Something flashed in his eyes. Relief, maybe, or hope. "I see. Then may I—" He hesitated. May I have this dance, Miss Whitmore? Every eye in their vicinity turned to watch. The Duke of Ashwell, asking his former household manager to dance. The scandal of it rippled outward like stones in water. This was the moment. Accept, and she'd be gossip fodder for weeks. Refuse, and she'd embarrass him publicly. Clarissa looked at Adrian's offered hand and thought about all the times he'd ignored her, dismissed her, looked through her like glass. And all the times recently he'd actually seen her. Yes, she said. His hand closed around hers, warm and solid. He led her onto the dance floor as the musicians struck up a waltz. Around them, the whispers started immediately. Who is she? The Duke doesn't dance with just anyone. I heard she worked for him. Adrian pulled her into position, one hand at her waist, the other holding hers. They began to move, and despite everything, despite the stares and the whispers and the absolute insanity of this moment, it felt right. You look beautiful, he said quietly. You look the same. He smiled slightly. I am the same. Still rigid, still controlled, still desperately trying to maintain order in a world that keeps shifting under my feet. How's that working for you? Terribly. They turned, swept past a cluster of watching matrons. Clarissa, Don't, she said. Not here. Not now. Then when? I don't know. Maybe never. Maybe... She stopped, because Christopher was standing at the edge of the dance floor, watching them. He didn't look angry. He looked sad. The dance ended. Adrian released her reluctantly. Around them, people stared and whispered behind fans and gloved hands. Thank you for the dance, Your Grace, Clarissa said formally. Clarissa, excuse me. She walked away before he could say whatever was written in his eyes, walked straight to Christopher, who met her halfway. You look happy, he said. I'm terrified. That's not what your face says when you look at him. Christopher smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. You love him, don't you? The question stopped her cold. It's all right. I think I knew from the start. I just hoped... He shook his head. Doesn't matter what I hoped. The question is, does he deserve you? I don't know. Well, when you figure it out, I hope you choose happiness, even if it's not with me. He took her hand, kissed it gently. Goodbye, Clarissa. Be brilliant, be free, be everything you deserve to be. Then he was gone, disappearing into the crowd. Clarissa stood frozen, her hand still tingling from his kiss. Around her the ball continued, music, laughter, the swirl of silk and jewels and privilege. She was in the middle of it all and completely alone. Until a hand touched her elbow. She turned to find a woman her own age, beautifully dressed, with kind eyes and a gentle smile. Miss Whitmore? I'm Sarah Ashworth. This is my parents' ball. I couldn't help but notice you seem a bit overwhelmed. Yes, I'm sorry, I'm not used to events like this. Neither am I, honestly. They're dreadfully boring. Sarah linked her arm through Clarissa's. Come, let's get some air, and you can tell me how you've managed to cause such a stir. The Duke of Ashwell dancing? With a woman he actually looks at? Half the mothers here are in apoplexy. Despite everything, Clarissa laughed. They escaped to the terrace, where the night air was cool and the music muffled. Sarah handed her a glass of champagne and settled onto a bench. So, you're the mysterious Miss Whitmore. I don't think I'm mysterious at all. You're mysterious to them. Sarah gestured toward the ballroom. A woman with no family connections, no fortune, who somehow captured the attention of two of the most eligible men in England. That's positively scandalous. I didn't capture anyone's attention. Clarissa stopped. I just existed near them, and they noticed. And the Duke? What does he mean to you? The directness should have been off-putting. Instead, it was refreshing. I don't know, Clarissa said honestly. He was my employer, then he was something else. Now he's... She shook her head. I don't know what he is. But you care about him. It wasn't a question. Clarissa looked out at the London night, at the light spreading across the city like fallen stars. Yes. Against all sense and reason, yes. Then you should tell him. I can't. Not yet. I need to know I'm choosing him because I want to, not because I need to. And right now, I don't know the difference. Sarah nodded thoughtfully. I understand. But Clarissa, if I may call you that, don't wait too long. Men like Adrian Hale don't open up often, and when they do, they don't know how to hold on unless you show them how. Before Clarissa could respond, shouts erupted from inside the ballroom. Both women rushed to the doorway to find chaos, people pushing, shoving, voices raised in alarm. Fire! Someone screamed. Fire in the east wing! Smoke was already curling through the air, acrid and thick. The music stopped. The crowd surged toward the exits, panic spreading like the flames. Clarissa's mind went immediately to survival mode, the same instincts that had kept Ashwell Park running through emergencies. Sarah, how many people are in the house? I don't know. Dozens of staff, the guests. Where's the east wing in relation to the servants' quarters? Directly above. Sarah's face went pale. The staff. Some of them are in their rooms. They might not know. Clarissa was already moving. She pushed against the crowd, heading toward the smoke instead of away from it. Miss Whitmore! Someone grabbed her arm. Adrian. His face was tight with fear. What are you doing? You need to get out. The servants' quarters are above the east wing. They might be trapped. The staff will handle it. The staff are panicking. Someone needs to... Not you. His grip tightened. Clarissa, please. Get to safety. She looked at him, at the fear in his eyes, fear for her, and she understood suddenly what Sarah had meant. This man, this rigid, controlled duke, was terrified of losing her. But people were trapped, and she'd spent 6 years running a household, managing emergencies, being the one who fixed things when they broke. She wasn't going to stop now. Let go of me, Adrian. No. Let go, or I'll make you let go. They stared at each other for one charged moment. Then she did something she'd never have dared 6 weeks ago. She kneed him, hard, right where it would hurt most. He doubled over with a choked gasp. She ran. The smoke was thicker in the corridors leading to the east wing. Clarissa pulled her shawl over her mouth and nose and kept moving. Behind her, she heard Adrian shouting, but she didn't stop. The servants' staircase was already filling with smoke. She found 3 maids huddled at the bottom, crying and coughing. Out! She commanded. Through the garden exit. Now! Move! They obeyed instinctively. She had that voice, the one that said she knew what she was doing even when she was terrified. She climbed the stairs. The heat was intense now, the smoke choking. On the second floor, she found 2 more servants, an elderly man and a young boy, both disoriented. This way, she said, guiding them back toward the stairs. The elderly man stumbled. She caught him, but he was heavier than she expected, and the smoke was so thick she couldn't see more than a few feet. I can't, he gasped. Go on without me. Like hell! She pulled his arm over her shoulder. Move, now! They made it to the stairs, started down. The smoke was so thick she was navigating by memory and instinct. Then someone was there, solid and strong, taking the man's other arm. Adrian. He didn't say a word, just helped her get the elderly servant down the stairs and out into the garden where people were gathering in shocked clusters. Once they were safe, Adrian turned to her, his face black with soot, his eyes blazing. That was the stupidest, most reckless. They would have died. You could have died. But I didn't. She coughed, her lungs burning. I did what needed to be done. You did what was insane. He grabbed her shoulders, not gently. You ran into a burning building, Clarissa. You could have been killed, and I... His voice broke. I can't lose you. Not now. Not when I just... He kissed her. Right there, in front of half of London society, covered in soot and smoke. He kissed her like she was air and he was drowning. Clarissa froze for half a second. Then she kissed him back. When they finally broke apart, the crowd around them was dead silent. Adrian didn't seem to notice, his forehead pressed against hers, his hand still cupping her face. I love you, he said hoarsely. I love you. And I don't care who knows it or what it costs me. I love you. Adrian, I know it's too soon. I know you need time and space and proof. I'll give you all of that, but first, I need you to know you're not alone anymore. Whatever you face, wherever you go, I'm with you, if you'll have me. Clarissa's eyes burned, and it wasn't from the smoke. Every person she'd ever cared about had left her. Her parents, through death. Her family, through indifference. She'd learned to be alone, to be self-sufficient, to need no one. But standing here in Adrian's arms, she didn't want to be alone anymore. "I love you too," she whispered. "You infuriating, impossible man. I love you too." He kissed her again, softer this time, like she was something precious he'd almost lost. Around them, scandal erupted in whispers and gasps. The Duke of Ashwell, kissing a woman in public. A woman with no rank, no fortune, no claim to his world. And neither of them cared at all. The kiss ended, but the consequences were just beginning. Around them, London society stood frozen in scandalized silence. Then the whispers started, a low hiss like steam escaping from a kettle, building to a roar. The Duke of Ashwell? Kissing a nobody in public? Absolutely shameless. Ruined. Both of them. Lady Pemberton appeared at Clarissa's elbow, her face unreadable. "Well, that was dramatic, and possibly the end of both your reputations." Adrian didn't let go of Clarissa's hand. "I don't care. You will tomorrow when half of London cuts you in the street." Lady Pemberton looked between them. "But for tonight, I suggest we leave before someone decides to make this worse." Sarah Ashworth pushed through the crowd, her face flushed. "My parents are calling for their physician. Miss Whitmore, you're hurt." Clarissa looked down. Her hands were blistered from the heat, her dress torn and blackened with soot. She hadn't even felt it. "I'm fine." "You're not." Adrian's voice was rough. "Let the physician look at you." "Adrian, I said I'm—" "Please." He turned her hands over gently, revealing the angry red burns across her palms. His jaw tightened. "Please, Clarissa, let someone take care of you for once." The vulnerability in his voice undid her. "All right." The next hour passed in a blur. The fire was contained. It had started in a storage room and been caught before spreading too far. The servants she'd rescued were checked by the physician and declared shaken but unharmed. And Clarissa found herself in Sarah's private sitting room, having her burns cleaned and bandaged, while Lady Pemberton and Adrian argued in low, tense voices outside the door. "You've compromised her completely," Lady Pemberton said. "I know. Society will destroy her. They'll call her an opportunist, a social climber, worse. And you'll be expected to either marry her immediately or cut her off entirely to save your reputation." "I'll marry her." Silence. Then Lady Pemberton laughed, short and sharp. "Just like that? You'll marry her? Have you even asked her? Has it occurred to you that she might not want to marry a man who spent 6 years ignoring her?" "I love her." "Love isn't enough, you fool. She needs security, respect, a position in society that doesn't depend on your whims. Can you give her that? Or will you marry her and then lock her away at Ashwell Park, another pretty thing in your collection of responsibilities?" The words hit like hammer blows. Clarissa pressed her bandaged hand against her mouth to keep from crying out. Adrian's response was so quiet she almost didn't hear it. "I don't know. I don't know how to be anything other than what I am, but I want to learn. For her, I want to learn." "Then learn quickly," Lady Pemberton said, "because that girl has been fighting for survival her entire life. She won't settle for being anyone's obligation, not even yours." Footsteps receded. A door closed. Sarah finished wrapping the last bandage and sat back. "Well, that was illuminating. You heard?" "Every word. My sitting room has terrible acoustics." Sarah smiled slightly. "For what it's worth, I think he means it. The Duke isn't a man who says things he doesn't mean. Meaning it isn't the same as doing it." "No, but it's a start." Sarah helped her to her feet. "The question is, what do you want?" What did she want? A week ago, she'd wanted independence, proof she could survive alone. Now Adrian had kissed her in front of everyone, declared his love, and Lady Pemberton was right. Society would eat her alive for it. Unless she married him, became a duchess, stepped into a role that would give her protection and status and everything she'd lost when her family fell apart, and potentially lose herself in the process. "I want to go home," Clarissa said, then stopped. "Except I don't know where home is anymore." Sarah squeezed her uninjured hand. Then I suppose you'll have to build a new one. Lady Pemberton's carriage was waiting. Adrian stood beside it, his face haggard. When he saw Clarissa, he started forward, then stopped, as if uncertain whether he had the right to approach her. How are your hands? Bandaged. I'll heal. Clarissa, about what I said. Not now. She couldn't have this conversation here, with half of London watching from the windows. Take me to Lady Pemberton's house. We'll talk tomorrow. Let me come with you. No. She saw him flinch and forced herself to soften. Adrian, you just kissed me in front of everyone. You declared yourself publicly, and now society is going to spend the next week tearing both of us apart. I need time to think, to figure out what I want without you standing there looking at me like, she gestured helplessly. Like I love you? Yes, like that. He nodded slowly. All right. But Clarissa, I meant what I said, every word. I love you, and I will wait as long as it takes for you to believe it. She climbed into the carriage without responding. As they pulled away, she looked back to see him standing in the street watching her go. He looked lost. The journey to Mayfair was silent. Lady Pemberton sat across from her, saying nothing, which was somehow worse than if she'd lectured. Finally, Clarissa couldn't stand it anymore. Say what you're thinking. I'm thinking you're in love with a man who's terrible at showing it, and you're both about to learn some very hard lessons about what happens when duty and desire collide. You think I should refuse him? I think you should be very certain of what you're accepting before you say yes. Lady Pemberton leaned forward. Marriage to a duke isn't a fairy tale, Clarissa. It's politics and appearances and living in a fishbowl where every mistake is magnified. You'll be scrutinized, judged, held to impossible standards. And if you fail to meet them, society won't blame Adrian. They'll blame you for reaching above your station. I know that. Do you? Because right now you're riding high on declarations and passion. But tomorrow, when the scandal sheets print your name alongside words like fortune hunter and social climber, will you still be so certain? Clarissa's hands throbbed beneath the bandages. What would you have me do? Refuse him? Go back to being invisible? I'd have you choose with your eyes open. Love him if you must. Marry him if you dare. But don't fool yourself into thinking it will be easy just because you saved a few servants from a fire. Lady Pemberton's eyes were kind but merciless. You'll be tested every day for the rest of your life. And unlike tonight, there won't always be a crisis to prove your worth. The words settled over Clarissa like ice water. The scandal broke at dawn. Clarissa woke in Lady Pemberton's guest room to find a stack of newspapers outside her door. Every single one carried some version of the same headline. Duke of Ashwell's shocking public display. Mystery woman captures Duke's heart and questions from household manager to Duchess. The Clarissa Whitmore story. She read them all, each one more vicious than the last. They called her an opportunist, a schemer, a woman of questionable virtue who'd used her position at Ashwell Park to seduce first the brother, then the Duke himself. One paper suggested she'd started the fire deliberately to make herself look heroic. Another implied she was pregnant and had trapped Adrian into a public declaration. By the time she finished, her hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold the pages. A knock. Lady Pemberton entered without waiting for permission, took one look at Clarissa's face, and sighed. I see you've read the morning entertainment. They're calling me a whore. They're calling you worse than that in the clubs. I have it on good authority that half the betting books in London have wagers on whether Adrian will actually marry you or quietly pay you off. Lady Pemberton sat on the edge of the bed. The question is, what are you going to do about it? What can I do? They've already decided who I am. Then prove them wrong, or prove them right. Either way, stop sitting here feeling sorry for yourself and decide who you actually want to be. The sharp words cut through Clarissa's spiral. That's rather harsh. You want gentle? Go find Adrian. He'll coddle you and apologize and promise to fix everything. But he can't fix this, Clarissa. Only you can. So what will it be? Are you the scheming fortune hunter they think you are? Or are you the brilliant, capable woman who ran an entire estate for 6 years and saved lives last night? Clarissa looked down at her bandaged hands. I don't know how to be that woman in their world. Then learn, or create your own world and damn theirs entirely. Lady Pemberton stood. But sitting here won't help, so get dressed. We have calls to make. Calls? Now? After this? Especially after this. If you hide, they win. If you face them, you have a chance. An hour later, Clarissa found herself in Lady Pemberton's drawing room wearing a borrowed dress and trying not to fidget while a parade of society women came to pass judgment. The first three cut her directly, looked through her like she didn't exist, spoke to Lady Pemberton while ignoring Clarissa completely. The fourth, a formidable dowager duchess, at least acknowledged her presence. "So you're the young woman causing all this fuss." "I didn't intend to cause any fuss, Your Grace." "Intentions matter less than results, Miss Whitmore. You've compromised the Duke of Ashwell. What do you intend to do about it?" The question hung in the air like a gauntlet. "I intend to live my life according to my own principles, Your Grace. Whether or not the Duke is part of that life remains to be seen." Shocked silence. Lady Pemberton coughed into her tea. The dowager's eyebrows rose. "You'd refuse him?" "I'd choose what's right for me, rather than what's convenient for society." Bold words for a woman with no prospects beyond his offer. "Perhaps, but I've survived worse than social disapproval. I'll survive this too." The dowager studied her for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, she smiled. "I believe you might. You have spine, Miss Whitmore, more than most of the simpering girls paraded through my drawing room every season. If you do marry the Duke, don't let him, or anyone else, break it." It wasn't acceptance, but it wasn't complete rejection either. After she left, Lady Pemberton let out a long breath. "Well, that could have gone worse. She still thinks I'm beneath him. Everyone thinks you're beneath him. You are beneath him, by society's standards. The question is whether that matters to you." Before Clarissa could answer, the butler appeared. "Your Grace, the Duke of Ashwell is here. He's asking to see Miss Whitmore." Clarissa's heart jumped. "Tell him I'm not—" "Show him in," Lady Pemberton said. To Clarissa, "You can't avoid him forever, and he looks like he hasn't slept. Might as well put the poor man out of his misery." Adrian entered looking exactly as Lady Pemberton described, haggard, rumpled, desperate. His eyes went straight to Clarissa. "You've seen the papers?" "Yes. I've spoken to every editor I could find, threatened lawsuits, called in favors, but they won't retract the stories. If anything, they're printing worse ones." He crossed to her, then stopped, as if remembering he no longer had the right to touch her. "Clarissa, I'm sorry. This is my fault. I should have been more careful, should have protected you better." "From yourself?" He flinched. "Yes. You can't protect me from the consequences of your feelings, Adrian, and I wouldn't want you to." She stood, faced him squarely. "But I need to know. What happens now? You kissed me in public. You declared yourself. Society expects you to either marry me or ruin me completely. So, which is it?" "I want to marry you." "Because you love me, or because it's the honorable thing to do?" "Both." He took a step closer. "Clarissa, I know I've handled this badly. I know I should have courted you properly, should have given you time and space and all the things you deserved, but I can't." His voice broke. "I can't lose you, not after finally finding the courage to fight for you. And if I say no? If I decide marriage to you would cost more than I'm willing to pay?" Pain flashed across his face. "Then I'll give you the best reference I can write and wish you well, and I'll spend the rest of my life regretting that I wasn't brave enough soon enough." Lady Pemberton stood abruptly. "I'm going to check on the kitchen. You two need privacy for this conversation." She swept out, leaving them alone. The silence stretched. Clarissa looked at this man who'd ignored her for years, then loved her with terrifying intensity, who'd let her go, then fought to get her back, who was rigid and controlled and absolutely falling apart in front of her. "I don't know if I can do this," she said quietly. "Be a duchess. Navigate society. Live up to expectations I never asked for. You don't have to be anything but yourself." "That's easy to say, harder to live." She held up her bandaged hands. "Last night, I ran into a fire because it was the right thing to do, because people needed help and I could give it. But Adrian, your world doesn't value that. They value titles and connections and blood. and I have none of those things. Then we'll change what they value. You can't change the entire aristocracy. Watch me. He took her hands gently, mindful of the burns. Clarissa, I spent 6 years living in a cage of my own making, following rules, maintaining order, being the perfect duke. And I was miserable. Then you walked into a burning building and reminded me that sometimes the right thing is the reckless thing, the brave thing, the thing that terrifies you, but has to be done anyway. That's not... Let me finish, please. He drew a shaky breath. If you marry me, I can't promise it will be easy. I can't promise society will accept you, but I can promise that I will fight for you every single day. I will stand beside you when they whisper. I will defend you when they attack. And I will love you even when, especially when you challenge me and disrupt my carefully ordered world. Clarissa's throat was tight. And if I'm not enough? If I fail to be the Duchess they expect? Then you'll be exactly the Duchess I need. Someone who sees beyond rules and duty to what actually matters. Someone who runs toward fires instead of away from them. He lifted her bandaged hands to his lips, kissed them gently. Someone who's strong enough to tell me when I'm being a rigid bastard. Despite everything, she laughed. The sound was watery and broken, but real. I need time, she said, to think, to figure out if I can live in your world without losing myself. How much time? I don't know. A week. A month. However long it takes. Adrian nodded slowly. I'll wait. But Clarissa, while you're thinking, remember this. He pulled a small box from his pocket, opened it to reveal a ring. Not an ostentatious diamond, but a simple gold band with 3 small emeralds. This was my mother's. She gave it to me before she died and told me to give it to someone who made me want to be better than I was. Someone who saw past the title to the man underneath. Clarissa stared at the ring. It was beautiful in its simplicity and terrifying in what it represented. I can't accept this. Not yet. I know. I'm not offering it yet. I'm just... He closed the box. I'm showing you what I'm hoping for. When you're ready, if you're ever ready. He left the box on the table between them and stood. I should go. Let you think. But Clarissa, whatever you decide, know that loving you was the bravest thing I've ever done. And I don't regret it. He walked out without looking back. Clarissa sat staring at the small box for a long time after he left. The next week was brutal. The scandal sheets continued their assault. Clarissa couldn't walk down the street without whispers following her. Lady Pemberton's friends, the ones who'd supported her position, began making excuses not to call. Invitations dried up. The few social events they did attend, Clarissa was either ignored or cut directly. She wanted to crawl into bed and never emerge. Instead, she worked. Lady Pemberton's household became her fortress. She threw herself into her duties with the same intensity she'd brought to Ashwell Park. She reorganized the entire house, streamlined the staff, negotiated better prices with suppliers. When Lady Pemberton mentioned a problem with her estate accounts, Clarissa spent 3 days auditing them and found embezzlement worth hundreds of pounds. Good heavens, Lady Pemberton said, staring at Clarissa's meticulous notes. How did you find this? I pay attention. It's what I do. The previous manager had been with me for 10 years. I trusted him completely. Trust is a luxury. Verification is survival. Lady Pemberton looked at her thoughtfully. You know, you're wasted as a companion. You should be running estates, managing businesses. You have a mind for systems and numbers that most men would kill for. Most men would also never acknowledge I have such a mind. Then find the ones who will, or... Lady Pemberton smiled slowly. Create your own opportunities. What if you didn't need a husband or an employer? What if you worked for yourself? The idea was radical and impossible and completely intriguing. Women don't run businesses. Some do. Widows mostly. Women with their own money. But why should they be the only ones? Lady Pemberton leaned forward. What if I invested in you? Gave you capital to start a household management service. You could consult with estates, help other women navigate their households, use that brilliant mind for profit instead of just survival. Clarissa's heart raced. You're serious. I'm always serious about good investments, and you, my dear, are an excellent investment. Lady Pemberton's eyes gleamed. Think about it. You could be independent, respected for your work, not your marriage prospects. You could build something that's entirely yours. It was tempting, so tempting, a life of her own making, dependent on no one. But it would also mean giving up Adrian, because a duchess couldn't run a business. A duchess had duties, expectations, an entire world of social obligations that would consume every hour of her day. I'll think about it, Clarissa said. 2 days later, everything changed again. Clarissa was reviewing household accounts when Lady Pemberton burst in, waving a newspaper. Have you seen this? I've been avoiding the scandal sheets. This isn't scandal. This is... Read it. It was the Times. A full-page editorial signed by some of the most respected names in England. Dukes, earls, military heroes, even 2 bishops. In defense of merit over birth. We, the undersigned, wish to address the recent controversy regarding the Duke of Ashwell and Miss Clarissa Whitmore. Society has chosen to focus on Miss Whitmore's lack of noble birth. We choose to focus on her character. This is a woman who, by all accounts, managed one of England's largest estates with exceptional skill for 6 years. A woman who, during the recent fire at the Ashworth Ball, risked her life to save servants others had forgotten. A woman who has demonstrated intelligence, capability, and courage in the face of circumstances that would have broken lesser people. The question society asks is whether she is worthy of the Duke. We suggest the question should be whether any of us are worthy of her. It is time England recognized that merit, character, and capability matter more than the accident of birth. Miss Whitmore embodies these qualities. If the Duke of Ashwell has the wisdom to recognize them, we should celebrate his judgment, not question it. Clarissa read it 3 times, her hands shaking. How did this... Keep reading. At the bottom was a list of signatures. Prominent men, influential men, men whose opinions shaped society, including Christopher Hale. And at the very top, in bold, decisive script, Adrian Hale, Duke of Ashwell. He did this, Clarissa whispered. He fought for me. He did more than that. He called in every favor he had, pressured every friend and ally, and put his own reputation on the line to defend yours. Lady Pemberton was smiling. The man is either deeply in love or deeply insane, possibly both. Clarissa's eyes burned. This was the proof she'd asked for. Not words, but action. Not promises, but sacrifice. Adrian had done what she thought impossible. He'd changed the conversation. I need to see him. I thought you might. Lady Pemberton handed her a card. He's at his London house. He's been there all week, writing letters, calling in favors, barely sleeping. Go to him, Clarissa. Put the poor man out of his misery. Clarissa went. The Duke's London residence was in Grosvenor Square. Massive, elegant, intimidating. She stood outside for a full minute, trying to gather her courage. Then the door opened, and Adrian stood there, looking haggard and hopeful, and absolutely terrified. You came. You wrote an editorial defending me to all of England. I wrote the truth. He stepped aside. Will you come in? She entered, and he led her to a private sitting room. Every surface was covered with papers, drafts of the editorial, letters from supporters, lists of names. How long did this take you? A week. I barely slept, barely ate, but it had to be perfect, had to be unassailable, because they were destroying you, and I couldn't... His voice broke. I couldn't let them win. Clarissa picked up one of the drafts, saw his handwriting cramped and desperate across the page. Why did you do this? Because I love you. Because you deserved someone fighting for you the way you've fought for yourself your entire life. Because, he took a shaky breath, because I needed to prove I meant what I said, that I wouldn't let you face this alone. She set down the paper and turned to face him. Lady Pemberton offered me an opportunity to start my own business, to be independent, to build a life that's entirely mine. His face went carefully blank. That's wonderful. You'd be brilliant at it. It would mean giving up any chance of marrying you. A duchess can't run a business. No, she can't. The pain in his voice was raw. But Clarissa, if that's what you need, if that's what will make you happy, then I want you to take it. I want you to have everything you deserve, even if it's not me. And if what I deserve is both, a life of my own and a man who loves me enough to let me have it? Adrian stared at her. That's not possible. Society would never. Society is already scandalized by us. What's a little more scandal? She moved closer. Adrian, I've spent my whole life being told what's possible and what's not, what I can have and what I can't, and I'm tired of it. So here's what I think. If we're going to break the rules, let's break all of them. What are you saying? I'm saying I'll marry you, on one condition. His breath caught. Name it. I want to start that business. I want to work. And I want you to support it, publicly, vocally, without apology. I want to be a duchess who does more than host parties and embroider cushions. I want to matter. You already matter. Then let me prove it to the world. She took his hands. I know it won't be easy. I know society will hate it. But Adrian, if we're going to do this, if we're going to build a life together, I need it to be a partnership of equals. Not you protecting me, but us facing the world together. Adrian was silent for a long moment. Then he smiled, a real smile, warm and genuine and utterly transforming. You're going to make the most unconventional Duchess England has ever seen. Is that a yes? It's a yes, to all of it. The marriage, the business, the scandal, the partnership. He pulled her close. You want to break all the rules? Let's do it. Together. He kissed her then, and it felt like coming home and jumping off a cliff at the same time. When they broke apart, Clarissa was breathless and laughing. We're going to be terrible at this. Probably, but we'll be terrible together. He reached for the small box on the table, the ring he'd shown her a week ago, and opened it. Clarissa Whitmore, will you marry me? Will you be my duchess, my partner, my equal in all things? Will you drive me mad and keep me honest and remind me every day that control is overrated? Yes, she said. To all of it, yes. He slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. Outside, London was already buzzing with the editorial. By tomorrow, society would be reeling from the news of their engagement. By next week, half the aristocracy would be scandalized by her plans to work. Clarissa didn't care. She'd spent 6 years being invisible, 3 weeks being destroyed, and 1 week fighting her way back. Now, finally, she was exactly where she wanted to be. Standing in the light, seen and valued, about to marry a man who loved her enough to let her be extraordinary. What happens now? Adrian asked. Now? Now we go tell your brother, so he stops looking at me like a kicked puppy. Then we tell Lady Pemberton, so she can start spreading the news before the gossips get to it. Then, she smiled, then we start building something new. A marriage, a business, a life that's ours. It won't be easy. Nothing worth having ever is. He kissed her again, softer this time. I love you. I love you too, even though you're still terrible at showing emotions. I'm working on it. I know, that's why I said yes. They stood together in his study, surrounded by the evidence of his fight for her, planning a future that would scandalize half of England and inspire the other half. And for the first time in her life, Clarissa wasn't afraid of what came next. She was ready. They told Christopher first. He was at his club when they arrived, and the moment he saw them together, Adrian's hand at Clarissa's back, the ring on her finger, his face went through a dozen emotions before settling on resigned acceptance. So, you're doing this. We are, Clarissa said, and I wanted you to hear it from us before the gossips got to you. Christopher signaled for whiskey, downed it in one gulp, then smiled, a real smile if a bit sad around the edges. Well, I can't say I'm surprised. You two have been dancing around each other since the day I arrived at Ashwell Park. Chris, Adrian started. No, it's fine, really. Christopher poured another drink but didn't touch it. I was never going to be what you needed, Clarissa. I can see that now. I wanted to rescue you, to give you freedom and adventure. But what you actually needed was someone who understood duty and burden and the weight of impossible choices. He looked at his brother. Someone as stubborn and brilliant as you are. I'm sorry, Clarissa said quietly. Don't be. I'll survive a broken heart. I've survived worse. He raised his glass. To the Duke and his future Duchess. May you make each other miserable in the best possible way. They drank to that. Then Christopher leaned back, his expression turning thoughtful. So what's the plan? Traditional wedding, quiet ceremony, or are you going to scandalize everyone by eloping? Actually, Clarissa said, we're planning something different. She told him about the business, about her plans to work even as a duchess. Christopher's eyes widened. You're going to give society an apoplexy. Good, Adrian said firmly. It's time society learned that women are capable of more than needlework and gossip. Christopher stared at his brother. Who are you and what have you done with Adrian Hale? I'm learning, Adrian said. Slowly. Clarissa's a patient teacher. I'm really not, Clarissa corrected. But he's a motivated student. The brothers laughed, and some of the tension dissolved. But as they left the club, Christopher caught Clarissa's arm. Take care of him. He won't admit it, but he needs someone to remind him he's human. Someone who won't let him hide behind duty and protocol. I will, I promise. And Clarissa, be happy. You deserve it more than anyone I know. The engagement announcement appeared in the Times the next morning. By noon, London was in an uproar. Half of society was scandalized. A duke marrying a woman with no family, no fortune, no connections? Unthinkable. The other half was intrigued. The editorial defending Clarissa had shifted the conversation just enough that some people were willing to give her a chance. But it was the detail about her business plans that really set tongues wagging. A duchess working? Mrs. Dalton had somehow made it to London and appeared at Lady Pemberton's door, red-faced and outraged. It's obscene! It's innovative, Lady Pemberton said coolly, and none of your concern. Now, unless you have actual business here, I suggest you leave before I have you removed. Mrs. Dalton left in a huff. But she wasn't the only one with opinions. The letters started arriving by the dozen. Some supportive, many critical, a few outright vicious. Clarissa read them all, her jaw tightening with each accusation. They're calling me a radical, she told Adrian that evening, a threat to the natural order. One woman wrote that I'm single-handedly destroying the institution of marriage. You're terrifying them, Adrian said. That's how you know you're doing something right. Or something incredibly stupid. He pulled her close. Do you want to stop? Call off the business, do things the traditional way? Did she? It would be easier, safer. She could be a conventional duchess, host parties and manage the household, and no one would bat an eye. But she'd spent her whole life choosing safe over satisfied. No, she said. I want to do this, even if it terrifies me, especially because it terrifies me. Then we move forward, together. The wedding was set for 3 months away, enough time to do it properly, but not so long that society could talk them out of it. In the meantime, Clarissa threw herself into building her business. Lady Pemberton's investment gave her enough capital to rent a small office in a respectable part of London and hire 2 assistants, women like her, educated but poor, desperate for work that used their minds. She called the business Whitmore and Associates, estate management consultancy. Her first client was a widow who'd inherited her husband's estate and had no idea how to run it. Clarissa spent 2 weeks analyzing the accounts, reorganizing the staff, and implementing systems that saved the woman hundreds of pounds a year. The widow was so impressed, she told her friends. 2 more clients followed, then 5, then 10. Within a month, Clarissa had more work than she could handle and a waiting list of women and a few progressive men who wanted her services. You're becoming famous, Lady Pemberton observed, or infamous, probably both. Is there a difference at this point? Not in your case. But fame, or infamy, came with a price. The criticism intensified. Conservative members of Parliament gave speeches about the degradation of proper womanhood. Society matrons refused to acknowledge her in public. Even some of Adrian's allies quietly suggested he reconsider the marriage. The pressure was constant, exhausting. Some days Clarissa wanted to quit, to walk away from the business and the scandal and just be quiet again. Those were the days Adrian would find her in her office, surrounded by ledgers and letters, and remind her why she was fighting. You're changing things, he'd say. Every woman who sees you succeeding is learning that she can too. That's worth the gossip. What if I fail? Then you fail spectacularly, and we figure out what comes next. But Clarissa, you won't fail. You're too stubborn. She'd laugh despite herself, and they'd go back to work, him handling his parliamentary duties, her managing estates and building something unprecedented. 2 months before the wedding, disaster struck. Clarissa had just taken on her biggest client yet, the Countess of Harrington, whose late husband had left the estate in chaos. The accounts were a mess, the staff was in rebellion, and the whole operation was hemorrhaging money. Clarissa spent 3 weeks straightening it out. She found embezzlement, fired the corrupt estate manager, and implemented new systems. Within a month, the estate was running smoothly and actually turning a profit. The former estate manager, a man named Blackwood, didn't take his dismissal well. He went to the scandal sheets with a story. According to him, Clarissa had fabricated evidence to get him fired. She'd seduced the Countess's son. She was running a scheme to take over estates from vulnerable widows. None of it was true, but truth mattered less than sensation. The story spread like wildfire. Within days, half of Clarissa's clients were pulling their contracts. Her assistants were harassed in the street. Someone threw a brick through her office window with a note, "Go back where you belong." Clarissa stood in her destroyed office, looking at the broken glass and scattered papers, and felt 6 years of survival instinct kick in. Run, hide, disappear. It's what she'd always done when things got bad. But she wasn't that woman anymore. "No," she said out loud. "Not this time." She hired a solicitor, the best one Adrian could recommend, and went after Blackwood for slander. She gave interviews to every newspaper that would listen, laying out exactly what she'd found in the Harrington accounts and providing documentation of every claim. She didn't hide. She didn't apologize. She fought. The trial was brutal. Blackwood's lawyer painted her as an opportunist, a social climber who'd used her position with the Duke to attack an innocent man. He brought in witnesses who testified to her questionable character and inappropriate ambitions. Clarissa sat in the courtroom and listened to herself be torn apart piece by piece. Then it was her turn to testify. She walked to the stand with her spine straight and her head high. When the solicitor asked her to explain what she'd found at the Harrington estate, she didn't just summarize. She brought out the ledgers, the receipts, the detailed evidence of theft that she'd compiled. "Mr. Blackwood stole from his employer for 3 years," she said clearly. "He falsified accounts, paid phantom employees, and diverted funds to his own pockets. I didn't fabricate evidence. I found it, and I reported it to the authorities, as was my duty." "Your duty?" Blackwood's lawyer sneered. "You're a woman with delusions of competence, playing at being something you're not." "I'm a woman who knows how to read a ledger and recognize theft when I see it. If that's a delusion, then perhaps more people should be delusional." Laughter rippled through the courtroom. The judge banged his gavel. "Order. Miss Whitmore, do you have proof of these claims?" "I have 3 years of documented theft, Your Honor. All cross-referenced, all verified. Mr. Blackwood didn't just steal money. He stole from a widow who trusted him. And when I exposed him, he tried to destroy my reputation rather than face the consequences of his actions." She presented the evidence, page after page of meticulous documentation. Every discrepancy noted, every false entry highlighted, every stolen pound accounted for. By the time she finished, Blackwood's lawyer looked sick. The jury deliberated for less than an hour. Guilty on all counts. Blackwood was ordered to repay the stolen funds and sentenced to 2 years in prison. Clarissa was awarded damages for slander. She walked out of the courtroom to find a crowd waiting, journalists, supporters, curious onlookers. Someone started clapping, then another person, then another, until the whole crowd was applauding. Adrian pushed through to reach her, his face blazing with pride. "You did it." "We did it." She was shaking so badly she could barely stand. I thought they'd side with him. That being a woman would... You gave them no choice. You were brilliant." He kissed her right there in front of everyone, and this time the crowd cheered instead of gasped. The trial changed everything. Newspapers that had attacked her now praised her courage. Clients who'd pulled their contracts came back, apologetic. New clients flooded in, so many that Clarissa had to hire more assistants and move to a larger office. But more than that, something shifted in society itself. Women started asking questions. If Clarissa Whitmore could run a business, could manage estates, could stand up in court and defend herself, what else were women capable of? Other businesses started to appear, run by women. a law practice, an accounting firm, even a small bank. All of them cited Clarissa as inspiration. "You've started something," Lady Pemberton said one evening. "Whether you meant to or not, you've shown people what's possible. There's no putting that genie back in the bottle. I just wanted to survive. And you've done that. But you've also done something more important. You've changed the rules for everyone who comes after you." The wedding took place on a crisp October day at Ashwell Park. Clarissa had insisted on returning to the estate for the ceremony. "It's where everything started," she'd told Adrian, "where I learned to be invisible and then learned to be seen. It feels right to come full circle." The guest list was unconventional, to say the least. Half were nobility, invited out of obligation or genuine friendship. The other half were people Clarissa had helped, clients, employees, the servants she'd saved from the fire. Thomas was there, beaming. Annie had been given a new position as Clarissa's personal maid and was crying happy tears throughout the ceremony. Even Sarah Ashworth attended, along with her parents, who'd forgiven the scandal once they realized how much attention it brought their family. Christopher stood as Adrian's best man, looking genuinely happy for them both. Lady Pemberton sat in the front row, her expression smug. She'd bet on this outcome from the start and wasn't letting anyone forget it. The ceremony itself was simple but beautiful. Clarissa wore a dress of ivory silk, elegant but not ostentatious. Her hair was dressed with fresh flowers from the Ashwell Gardens, the same gardens where she'd cut blooms as a nameless household manager. When the vicar asked if anyone objected, a few people shifted uncomfortably, but no one spoke. The moment passed. Adrian's vows were traditional, but when he spoke them, his voice was rough with emotion. "I take you, Clarissa, to be my wife, my partner, my equal in all things. I promise to see you, to value you, to stand beside you in whatever you choose to do. From this day forward." Clarissa's vows were less traditional. She'd written them herself. "I take you, Adrian, to be my husband, my partner, my challenger when I need challenging, and my support when I need supporting. I promise to never let you hide behind duty or protocol, to remind you that being human is more important than being perfect, and to love you even when you're being impossibly stubborn." More laughter. The vicar looked slightly scandalized but continued, "I now pronounce you husband and wife. Your Grace, you may kiss your bride." Adrian kissed her, and it felt like every promise he'd ever made and every promise still to come. The celebration afterward was magnificent. The ballroom where Clarissa had once stood, invisible and unnoticed, was now filled with people celebrating her, dancing with her, acknowledging her not as a curiosity or a scandal, but as the Duchess of Ashwell. At one point, Clarissa found herself standing at the edge of the room, watching the party swirl around her. Adrian appeared at her side. "Overwhelmed?" "A little. I keep expecting someone to realize this is all a mistake and ask me to go back to managing the household." "Never going to happen. You're stuck with me now." She smiled. "There are worse fates." "Are there?" He pulled her closer. "What are you thinking about?" "About how different this is from 6 years ago. When I first came here, invisible and desperate, and now," she gestured to the room, "now I'm the center of attention at my own wedding ball. It's surreal." "You earned it, every bit of it." "Did I? Or did I just get lucky? Right place, right time, right man finally noticing me." Adrian turned her to face him fully. "Clarissa Whitmore, Clarissa Hale now. You are the most brilliant, stubborn, infuriating woman I've ever met. Nothing about your success is luck. You fought for every inch of it. You ran into fires and stood up in courtrooms and refused to be invisible even when everyone wanted you to disappear. That's not luck. That's courage." Her throat tightened. "I was terrified the entire time." "That's what made it courage." He kissed her forehead. "Now come dance with me. It's our wedding, and I want to show off my Duchess." "You just want an excuse to hold me in public." "That too." They danced, and around them, society watched. Some with approval, some with lingering disapproval, but all of them watching a woman who'd refused to stay in the box they'd built for her. Later that night, after the guests had left and the house had settled into quiet, Clarissa stood in what had once been her tiny room in the family wing. It was empty now, repurposed into storage. Adrian found her there. "What are you doing?" "Remembering. This was my room, For 6 years, this was where I wrote in my journal about being invisible, about wondering if anyone would notice if I left. He pulled her into his arms. I would have noticed. Eventually. I was just too much of a coward to admit it. You weren't a coward. You were scared. There's a difference. Is there? Yes, cowards run away. You stood still and tried to control everything around you. Not better, exactly, but different. He laughed softly. Only you would find a way to criticize me on our wedding day. Someone has to keep you humble. I'm married to you. Humility is guaranteed. They stood together in the small room that represented everything Clarissa had been. Invisible, uncertain, surviving by the thinnest of margins. Then Adrian led her out, down the hall, to the Duchess's suite. Her suite now. Spacious, beautiful, with windows overlooking the gardens and a desk already set up with her business papers. This is your space, Adrian said, to work, to think, to be whoever you need to be. The duchy has a duchess's suite, but you don't have to be just a duchess. You can be Clarissa too. She looked around the room at the space he'd made for all the versions of herself. The duchess, the businesswoman, the survivor, the woman who'd learned to be seen. I love you, she said, even though you still occasionally try to control everything. I'm working on it. I know. That's why I married you. They fell into bed together, and for once, Clarissa didn't think about tomorrow's challenges or next week's problems. She just existed in this moment, with this man, in this life they were building together. 6 months later, Clarissa sat in her London office, reviewing contracts for 3 new clients, when Lady Pemberton swept in unannounced. I bring news. The Queen has requested an audience with you. Clarissa's quill stopped mid-stroke. What? You've been summoned to court. Apparently Her Majesty has heard about your business and wants to discuss employing your services for one of the royal estates. Lady Pemberton was grinning like a cat with cream. You're going to advise the Queen, Clarissa. The Queen. It should have been terrifying. 6 months ago it would have been. But Clarissa just smiled and reached for a fresh sheet of paper. Then I'd better prepare a proposal. Does Her Majesty prefer detailed documentation or executive summaries? That's my girl. Not even royalty intimidates you anymore. Oh, I'm terrified, but I'm doing it anyway. That evening she told Adrian over dinner. He was quiet for a long moment, then started laughing. What's funny? You. Me. This entire impossible situation. He reached across the table for her hand. A year ago, you were invisible. 6 months ago, you were my household manager. Now you're my Duchess. You're running the most successful business consultancy in London, and you're about to advise the Queen. How did this happen? I stopped accepting invisibility as survival. I stopped letting other people define what I could be. She squeezed his hand. And I found someone stubborn enough to stand beside me while I figured it out. I didn't do anything. You saw me. When no one else did, when I'd taught myself not to expect it, you saw me. That changed everything. They finished dinner and walked through the London house together, planning the presentation for the Queen, discussing estate business, arguing about whether they should host a dinner party next month. It was ordinary and extraordinary at the same time. Later, Clarissa stood at the window of their bedroom, looking out over the city lights. Adrian came up behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist. Any regrets? About marrying you? Frequently. She felt him tense and smiled. But only when you leave your boots in the middle of the floor or try to reorganize my desk without asking. I was trying to help. You were trying to control. There's a difference. I'm working on it. I know. She turned in his arms. No real regrets, Adrian. This life, it's harder than I expected. Society still whispers. Some people still think I married above my station. My business gets criticized regularly. But I'm not invisible anymore. I matter, and that's worth every difficulty. You always mattered. Maybe. But now I know it. And now everyone else knows it too. A year after the wedding, Clarissa published a book. It wasn't something she'd planned. A publisher had approached her, asking if she'd be willing to write about household management and estate administration. At first she'd refused. Who would want to read about ledgers and staff management? But Lady Pemberton convinced her. Women need this information. They need to know how to manage their own affairs, protect themselves financially. You have knowledge that could change lives. Share it. So Clarissa wrote. In between client meetings and Duchess duties, and the occasional evening with the Queen's household staff, she wrote a practical guide to estate management for women. The Capable Woman's Guide to Estate Administration became a sensation. It sold out in 3 days. Publishers ordered a second printing, then a third. Women bought it not just for the practical advice, but because it represented possibility. If Clarissa Whitmore could go from invisible household manager to Duchess and successful businesswoman, what couldn't they do? The book launch party was held at Ashwell Park. The same ballroom where Clarissa had once been ignored now hosted hundreds of women, from duchesses to shopkeepers' wives, all celebrating what the book represented. Christopher attended, bringing a date, a lovely woman named Margaret who ran a publishing house and kept him thoroughly humble. He pulled Clarissa aside during the party. I read the book. It's brilliant. You should be proud. I am, terrified, but proud. Still terrified? After everything you've accomplished? Always. But I do it anyway. He smiled. That's the Clarissa I know, the one who runs toward fires instead of away from them. He looked around the ballroom. You've changed this place, you know. It used to feel like a mausoleum. Now it feels alive. People need to feel alive in their own homes, even if those homes are enormous estates with too many rules. Speaking of rules, I hear you're planning to open a school, teaching women business management? Lady Pemberton's idea. But yes, if it works, if we can get funding. She stopped. Why are you smiling like that? Because I want to invest. In the school, in your business, in whatever ridiculous, brilliant thing you come up with next. His expression turned serious. I meant what I said at your wedding, Clarissa. I wanted to rescue you, but what you've done is rescue yourself and then turn around and start rescuing others. That's... He cleared his throat. That's better than anything I could have offered you. Christopher, I'm happy for you. Genuinely. You and Adrian, you work. In a weird, occasionally dysfunctional way, you work. And I'm glad I could be part of the story, even if I wasn't the ending. You'll always be part of it. You helped me see I could be more than invisible. Yeah, you were never invisible, Clarissa. You were just standing in the wrong light. All I did was move the lamp. That night, after the guests had left and the house had quieted, Clarissa stood on the balcony outside the master suite, looking out over the Ashwell Park grounds. The same ground she'd walked 6 years ago, invisible and uncertain, and convinced she'd never be more than useful. Adrian joined her, bringing wine and that particular expression that meant he had something important to say. I've been thinking. Dangerous occupation for you. He ignored the jab. What if we did something radical? More radical than our entire marriage? What if we opened Ashwell Park, not just for parties, but for education? Use the library for your school, the grounds for teaching practical estate management, made this place actually useful instead of just impressive. Clarissa turned to stare at him. You want to turn your ancestral home into a school? I want to turn it into something that matters, something that helps people instead of just existing as a monument to inherited privilege. He took her hand. You've spent a year showing me that purpose matters more than propriety. I want to do something purposeful with this place. The family will have collective apoplexy. Let them. I've been the proper duke for 34 years. Time to be the useful duke instead. She kissed him, hard and fierce and full of love. You're sure about this? Never been more sure of anything except marrying you. Then let's do it. Let's turn this entire estate into something extraordinary. They spent the next hour planning, arguing, revising, dreaming up possibilities. By the time they finally went to bed, they had the rough outline of a vision that would take years to implement and likely scandalize 3 generations of Hale ancestors. Clarissa didn't care. She'd spent too long being careful, being invisible, being less than she could be. Now she had the power, the platform, and the partner to be extraordinary. And she was going to use every bit of it. 5 years after that first kiss in the garden, after the scandal and the trial and the wedding, Clarissa stood in the newly opened Whitmore School for Women's Education and watched her first class of students receive their certificates. 20 women from backgrounds as varied as hers had been, had spent 6 months learning estate management, accounting, business administration. They'd learned from the best teachers money could hire, and from Clarissa herself, who taught advanced estate management every Wednesday. Now they were graduating, ready to take positions as estate managers, business consultants, accountants, ready to be more than invisible, more than useful. One of them, a girl named Elizabeth, who reminded Clarissa painfully of herself, approached after the ceremony. "Your Grace, I wanted to thank you. A year ago I was working as a maid in a house where no one saw me. Now I have a position managing an estate in Yorkshire. You changed my life." Clarissa's throat tightened. "You changed your own life. I just showed you it was possible." "That's everything, though, isn't it? Just knowing it's possible?" "Yes," Clarissa said softly. "That's everything." She watched the students leave, these women who would go out into the world and be seen, be valued, be extraordinary. And she thought about that first morning at Ashwell Park, when she'd arrived desperate and invisible, convinced survival was the best she could hope for. She'd been so wrong. Survival was just the beginning. The real question was what you did after you survived, how you used your strength, your scars, your hard-won knowledge to build something better. Adrian found her in the empty classroom, staring out the window at the grounds where students were celebrating. "You look thoughtful." "I'm thinking about how far we've come. From that morning when you returned to Ashwell Park and barely noticed I existed." "I noticed. I just didn't know what to do about it." "And now?" "Now I can't imagine not noticing you. You're impossible to ignore." He pulled her close. "You've transformed this estate, changed society's views on women working, educated hundreds of students, advised the Queen, published 3 books, and somehow managed to be an excellent Duchess while doing all of it. You're exhausting." "Is that a complaint?" "It's a compliment, a terrified one, but a compliment nonetheless." She laughed and leaned into him. "I couldn't have done any of it without you." "Yes, you could have. You're Clarissa Whitmore, Clarissa Hale. You would have found a way. But I'm glad I got to be part of it." They stood together watching the celebration. 2 people who'd learned to see each other, to value each other, to build something extraordinary together. The invisible woman had become unstoppable, and this time she owned the light. Years later, when people asked how she'd gone from household manager to one of the most influential women in England, Clarissa would smile and give the same answer. "I stopped accepting invisibility as survival. I stopped letting other people define what was possible. And I found someone brave enough to stand beside me while I figured out who I really was." It was the truth, but not the whole truth. The whole truth was messier, more complicated, full of fear and failure, and moments when she'd wanted to give up. The whole truth included the nights she'd cried from exhaustion, the times society had been cruel, the constant battle to prove she deserved her place. But the whole truth also included this: she'd survived, she'd fought, she'd changed the rules for everyone who came after. And in the end, that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. The estate at Ashwell Park thrived under their joint management, half traditional duchy, half radical educational institution. The Whitmore School grew, adding programs in law, medicine, business. Women came from across England and beyond to learn, to grow, to become more than society said they could be. Clarissa taught when she could, managed her consultancy business, advised various noble houses and even some international clients. She published more books. She gave lectures. She lived loudly and visibly and unapologetically. And every night, she came home to a man who'd learned to love her, not despite her refusal to be conventional, but because of it. One evening, many years after that first invisible day at Ashwell Park, Clarissa stood in the ballroom during another school graduation. The room was packed with students, teachers, supporters. The same room where she'd once stood unnoticed was now filled with people celebrating what she'd built. Adrian appeared at her side, older now, grayer, but still looking at her like she was the most extraordinary thing he'd ever seen. "What are you thinking about?" "About that first day. When I arrived here, certain I'd spend the rest of my life being invisible. And instead? Instead, I became impossible to ignore." She smiled. "Thanks to a duke who finally learned to see." Thanks to a woman who refused to stay hidden. He took her hand. Come on, they're waiting for you to give the commencement speech. Clarissa walked to the front of the room, looked out at hundreds of faces, students, colleagues, friends, people whose lives she'd touched. She'd started as nothing. She'd become everything, and she'd done it by refusing to accept that invisible was the best she could be. We begin, she said, her voice carrying across the ballroom, by being seen. The room erupted in applause, and Clarissa Hale, once Clarissa Whitmore, once invisible and now undeniable, smiled. This was her light. She'd earned every bit of it, and she was never letting it go.